subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
That kid was arrested a month ago by a guard I know. He was a thief from the outer city. He was nearly beaten to death before he was sent to prison, and he has been lying in jail sick ever since. You said he suddenly became so strong and made it into the top 4. Isn't that strange? The guard chuckled gossipingly. But the universe is so vast that there might be a fighting race that could greatly increase its strength after recovering from a serious injury. The guard concluded with an imaginative mind. Kyle listened, his eyes flickering. He knew the reason why the child suddenly became stronger. It was naturally because the venom had become symbiotic with him. But why did venom do this? It coexists with a seriously injured child. Who was it originally coexisting with? It's right in front, the guard said, pointing forward. The entrance to the prison could be seen not far away. Kyle's steps suddenly stopped. His face became more solemn than ever, and all the muscles in his body were slightly tense. Something is wrong. Something is so wrong. Chapter 180: Venom Betrayal. In the dimly lit underground prison corridor, Kyle frowned and keenly smelled a strong smell of something wrong in the air. He was a war hero who had fought his way through World War II on Earth, and he had a unique grasp of the battlefield situation. At this moment, he clearly felt a faint chill in the air. Who is pitting him? What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Your visiting time is only 5 minutes, and it's counting. The guard saw Kyle stop and turned back to urge him. It's okay. Kyle shook his head and walked slowly forward. He did not sense any ill will from the older guard. If this was a trap, then perhaps even the prison guards were pawns. This was buried too deeply. If you think about it carefully, Kyle has only arrived on the planet Sokka for a few days, and the only people he knows are by Bo and in Lee. He doesn't have the spare time to offend anyone. Equipped with an all-in-one combat suit and dressed as a half-Black Panther, he managed to destroy an alien gang, free a Proxima Midnight Elf, and even took the guard spaceship around the main city a few times. But that was when his true identity was not exposed. If the guards knew his identity, they would have arrested people all over the city. Why would they bother with such conspiracy? After much thought, there is only one answer left, which is the most unbelievable but also the most reasonable answer at the moment. Venom. Kyle stared and clenched his fists quietly. He decided to put aside his speculation and follow the guard to meet the challenger of the venom symbiosis. It won't be too late to draw conclusions once we meet the person. Coming out of the underground passage, the view suddenly opened up. Under the bright lights on the ceiling and floor, the hall inside the prison was spacious, but the floor looked a little dirty, and the air was filled with a slightly pungent smell of blood and disinfectant. On both sides of the hall, metal cages were filled with aliens wearing simple prison uniforms. When the guards brought Kyle to the hall, pairs of empty and cold eyes fell on Kyle. Oh, there's a newcomer? No, look at his clothes. It's actually an outsider. Can anyone come to this prison? Along with whistles, the voices of numerous alien criminals continued to echo in the prison. Behave yourself, the guard warned coldly, turning back and speaking slowly to Kyle. Follow me. The top 4 qualifiers are all in the innermost, separate cells. Kyle nodded and followed the guard inside. When passing by one of the prison cages, a huge amount of black shadows suddenly rushed out and hit the iron door hard, triggering flashes of electric light from the protective door system, flowing on the tough and smooth outer skin. The guard was so frightened that he almost fell to the ground in panic. Kyle turned his head indifferently and looked into the eyes of the double-headed creature with 4 dark green vertical pupils at a distance of less than half a meter. Sizzle. The 2-headed snake was covered in crackling electric light, paralyzing and weakening its body. Despite this, it remained indifferent, with scarlet tongue sticking out from between its fangs and saliva dripping from its mouth, staring coldly at Kyle as if he were looking at delicious food. Kyle had a blank expression on his face, showing no sign of fear. Go a little further inside. Let's go quickly. The guard patted his chest with lingering fear, not daring to look at the terrifying and cold-blooded monster. It was not until Kyle left the cage that the 2-headed snake twisted its body and coiled down. Interesting. In the single-cell cage directly opposite, the sickle man licked his lips, and his pair of scimitar-like arms rubbed against each other, still flashing a cold light in the dimly lit cage. The guard stopped at the innermost cage of the underground prison. Kyle looked inside and saw the tentacled child sitting in the corner of the cage, with nerve-paralyzing devices that glowed blue on his limbs and neck. Standing outside the cage, Kyle was 5 meters away and could not see the ability card on the tentacled child. The child had no intention of moving and just sat there in a daze, motionless. He's just like that. He only displays such terrifying fighting power in the duel arena. The guard whispered, "Can I go in?" Kyle asked the guard. "Okay, but be careful." The guard took out the instrument and operated the door to open while reminding, "Although we have put a detention device on him, you know that its hidden tentacles are very powerful." "I know." After the door opened, Kyle immediately stepped into the cage and approached the tentacled child step by step. 5 meters, 4 meters, 3 meters. The tentacled child did not react. At this time, Kyle had completely reached the distance where he could check the cards. He stopped and had an idea. Proficiency in Galactic Alliance language. Proficiency in stealing. Proficiency in running. Only a few cards emerged, and none of them were higher than green in rank. This shows that the venom is no longer in the alien child's body. Otherwise, the presence of venom will be presented as information on the biological card and can be extracted in a recyclable manner. Kyle was silent for a moment, looked at the child, and tried to ask, "Do you know venom?" The child shuddered and raised his head. His face was weak and pale. He stared at Kyle blankly. His empty eyes gradually regained clarity, and he smiled strangely. "You shouldn't have come." "What?" Kyle was stunned and stared at him. "You really know about venom. Where did it go after it left your body?" "I guess so, but it has another name now. Now that you're here, it's time for my work to end." The child said to himself inexplicably, maintaining a weird smile, and his little face suddenly turned red. Not only that, in Kyle's doubtful eyes, the child's thin and short body began to inflate like a deflated balloon, rapidly growing larger and expanding. "Damn it!" Kyle's face turned pale. He turned around and rushed out. He just rushed to the door of the cage. The guard outside the door opened his mouth in shock. In his sight, the child's body had swelled more than 3 times its size and turned red. The next moment, bang! The huge amounts of explosions were like thunder in the sky, shaking the entire underground prison. The cage that held the child was destroyed in the explosion, leaving no trace of the child's body. After the blood mist settled, only Kyle was left standing upright in the passageway, unscathed. The guard next to him was blown away by the explosion and hit the wall, falling unconscious to the ground in a bloody mess. The prisoners in the prison had not yet figured out what was happening. Warning lights flashed everywhere in the prison, and loud and urgent alarms echoed. "Intruder spotted. All guards, please go immediately." Repeat. "Intruder spotted. All guards, please go immediately." It was indeed a trap. Kyle glanced at the messy cage and the handsome face with a few drops of blood from the self-explosion. His expression was gloomy and cold. Venom. What a betrayal. Chapter 181. Battle in the alien prison. His fingers were clenched into fists so tightly that his nails pierced into his palms. A slight stinging sensation was transmitted to Kyle's heart, keeping him awake enough. Everything before my eyes undoubtedly showed that no matter how unbelievable it was, this was an indisputable fact. Only Venom, the symbiote who knew him inside and out, could set such a huge amount of traps for him. Venom, Venom. Kyle's face remained calm, but his blue eyes seemed to be brewing some kind of storm. The veins on his forehead bulged slightly. His iron-like muscles bulged to push his clothes, and his fists were clenched so tightly that they turned white and made a rattling sound. Anger. This is the first time Kyle has been so angry. Venom. Was he praising it for its smart growth? Or was he saying it had become so stupid? Didn't he know the consequences of betraying him? After being with him for so long, don't you have any idea? There's the intruder. Catch him. We can't let him get away. With frequent and dense footsteps and shouts, a team of more than a dozen alien guards armed with laser guns rushed into the passage, and the leading team leader pointed at Kyle, who was standing alone in the passage. "You get out of here!" The cold words came out of his mouth, and Kyle looked at the alien guard indifferently. His body suddenly moved at such a speed that his figure became blurred in the guard's sight. In the blink of an eye, Kyle took the initiative to rush into the alien guards. The faces of the two alien guards in front changed drastically. Just as they were about to raise their laser guns to aim, Kyle stretched out his hands like lightning and grabbed their arms respectively. Kyle twisted it hard, and a crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. The two alien guards immediately fell to the ground wailing, and their arms were twisted like twisted dough sticks. At the same time, Kyle kicked out with his right foot twice in a row, kicking the guard lying on the ground like a ball. Bang! Bang! The two guards were severely injured and lost consciousness. Their bodies were pierced by lasers from their teammates in the back while in midair. Blood splattered everywhere, and their body parts crashed into the team behind them. The scene was bloody and chaotic. Kyle had no intention of stopping. He was in a rage state and wanted to vent his anger. The prison guards who came over at this time were just enough to bear his anger. He leaped and rushed in front of the other guards, and with a brief burst of power, he blasted out with his elbow, quickly hitting one of the guards' chest. With 10 times the strength of a human and superb force-generating skills, this blow undoubtedly had an impact force of more than a ton. The guard vomited blood, his chest collapsed, and his broken ribs protruded from his back, piercing a guard behind him, and were thrown several meters away like a kite with a broken string. In less than 5 seconds, most of the alien guard team lost their combat ability. Kyle's eyes were filled with cold light, and he stepped out with a cold and violent aura. His boot landed on the wrist of a guard who was about to get up, and he stepped on it hard and crushed it. "Venom, how long are you going to hide? Come out!" Ignoring the guard's wails, Kyle's powerful and cold voice echoed throughout the prison. Since he can so easily utilize the resources of Sokka Prison and symbiotically manipulate criminals back and forth to set up such a trap, the bodies that Venom mainly relies on and utilizes at this time are mostly the guards of Sokka. "If you don't come out, I'll catch you," Kyle said coldly. He walked to the underground hall of the prison, and dozens of alien guards appeared in front of him again. Squeak! The laser beam was blinding and dazzling, blocking Kyle's body and his way. Kyle advanced instead of retreating, quickly jumped up and changed his pace, stepped firmly on the wall, and rushed into the armed guards. He was like a tiger among a flock of sheep, and for a moment the screams of the alien guards were continuous. At this time, at the entrance of the underground prison, "Hello, manager." The guard outside the door looked at the visitor respectfully and saluted to greet him. "What's the situation inside?" Tushua asked calmly. "The guards responsible for guarding the prison have already gone in. They also brought the remote control with them, so they should be able to suppress the situation smoothly." Before the guard finished speaking, an angry voice echoed in the passage from the underground prison, faintly reaching the ears of the two men. "Venom, come out here!" During this time, there were also the guard's tragic screams. "This!" The guard closed his mouth in embarrassment, while Tu Xiao's face changed slightly, and his body and soul began to tremble. That was the pressure and fear that she had since birth. Her body and mind, from the inside out, warned her not to violate that man, let alone become his enemy. Notify the guard's spaceship outside the prison to surround this area of the interstellar venue. Do not let the invaders escape. Tu Xiao patted the guard's arm to show encouragement, then turned around and left decisively. "Yes!" The guard was stunned, watching the massacre as if he was fleeing in panic. Inside the underground prison, the criminals in the cages were staring at Kyle, who was fighting against dozens of guards in the hall outside, and they were so stunned that they couldn't speak. In one word, fierce and brutal. "TSK, TSK, two-headed monster, can you still hold back?" On the other side, the sickle man grinned, taunted the two-headed snake in the cage opposite, and suddenly swung his knife down. With a flash of knife light, he even cut the iron bars of the cage door smoothly into 2 pieces. The high-voltage electricity was transmitted through the hand knife to the sickle man. His body stiffened for a moment, and then he walked out of the cage through the hole as if nothing had happened. His body blurred and disappeared, but he rushed towards the hall at supersonic speed. When the two-headed snake saw him leaving, it straightened its upper body exposed its fangs in both mouths, and bit the cage door. Against the backdrop of electric light, it looked like a giant electric eel. It twisted its body, pulling the iron bars of the cage out of shape and twisting into a ball. It raised its double head and slid quickly along the ground, devouring the bodies of the guards along the way. These monsters, in a separate cage, the weakest six-eyed alien among the top, for was curled up and shivering. In the prison hall, Kyle was ready to kill, and he seemed to have returned to the meat grinder on the battlefield of human warfare. Even if he had no weapons in his hands, his body was the strongest killing weapon, and the guards he passed by were cut down to the ground like wheat. Seeing that the guards in the prison were wiped out again, a guard captain spoke majestically. "Intruders, stop. Kneel on the ground with your hands behind your head." Kyle pretended not to hear anything and punched the guard in front of him away. Looking up, he saw the captain of the guard hiding at a safe distance of more than 10 meters away, holding a remote controller in his hand. "Don't force me to use extreme measures," the captain of the guard said coldly. Kyle walked towards him slowly with a blank expression on his face. The captain of the guard suddenly became anxious, gritted his teeth, and looked at him. "If you take another step forward, I will." While giving the warning, Kyle had already taken 2 more steps, looking at the guard captain as if he were a dead man. "Get down, you criminal," the captain of the guard said, pressing the controller button hard with his thumb. But Kyle was fine and continued walking forward. The captain of the guard tried to press it a few more times, but there was still no response. It was not until Kyle walked up to him that he knelt on the ground in fear. "Why? You should have a paralysis nerve control device on your body. Why is there no response?" "I figured it out a long time ago," Kyle shrugged. "This is impossible. No one can unlock the control device by themselves." The captain of the guard opened his eyes wide and said bitterly, "You can think about this slowly after you die." Kyle said he had no obligation to explain. He raised his left knee and violently struck the opponent's chin. The captain of the guard flew up and hit the ceiling above his head, with half of his body hanging there. Chapter 182. Carry an arsenal with you. 3 more chapters. Please subscribe. The paralysis nerve control device. Once the adsorbent is in the human body, it is connected to the skin and flesh and is difficult to remove. If you try to pull it out with external force, it will trigger the passive protection and release neurotoxins that are enough to knock out any life. This is also the last level of control used by the Saka Planet guards to deal with the imprisoned criminals. Unfortunately, this trick that has always worked is completely ineffective against Kyle, who has a mechanical life with him. For Weiss, the energy stored in the neurotoxin device tastes good. Kyle pulled up his collar, and the neurotoxin device on his neck deformed slightly, extending a headphone-like end. He reported, "Master, the radio waves have detected nearly 10 spaceships surrounding this area. It won't be long before the area here is completely blocked." "Really? Then let's leave here first. Venom won't dare to stay in the underground prison anyway. Scan the building structure here and find a safe passage leading to the outside." Kyle suppressed his anger and gave the order. "Yes." Weiss received it and spread the radio waves to the surroundings, penetrating the walls and performing calculations quickly. In just 3 seconds, Kyle received the guidance message from Vess. He set off without hesitation and broke through the alien guards with brutal force, and broke out of the prison hall into an underground passage leading out. Seeing that he couldn't stop Kyle, the deputy captain of the guard let him enter the passage and then said urgently to the communicator, "Hurry up and open the space corridor for me. Don't let him leave the underground prison." As soon as the words fell, the deputy captain of the guard suddenly opened his mouth in horror. In the cage area, a man with a sickle and a ferocious wind pressure ignored the guards, flew across the hall in an instant, and also rushed into the passage where Kyle walked in. "Add more manpower and bring over the neurotoxin controller of Blade." Before he finished speaking, the deputy captain of the guard paused again, and a huge amount of 2-headed snake beast appeared. Amid the desperate exclamations of the guards, 2 bloody mouths swallowed the snake belly as soon as they saw anyone along the way, twisting its snake body and slithering towards the man with the sickle. "Then take the neurotoxin controller of the 2-headed monster." The deputy captain of the guard shuddered halfway through his words and said hysterically, "No, go and ask the master. There are 3 monster-level fugitives. We can't resist them at all." In the 3-meter-wide underground passage, Kyle was running in circles at a rapid speed. That's right, it's going in circles. Kyle suddenly stopped and looked at the glowing ceiling and walls, as well as the bloody footprints he left on the ground. He said in surprise, "Weiss, am I walking this path for the second time?" "Yes, you went around in a circle," replied Vess. "It's obviously a straight passage. How come it goes around to the starting point?" Kyle felt even more puzzled. Weiss was silent for a few seconds, then gave a reasonable explanation. The Weiss planet has a high-tech protection technology called a space corridor. When it is open from the outside, the inner space will be connected in an infinite loop, making it impossible for the creatures in the corridor to escape. Isn't this just a fight between trapped beasts? Kyle thought about it and came up with an idea. His body went into stealth mode and turned into a ball of black mist. Stealth, Nightcrawler state, forced escape skill activated. Kyle muttered to himself, his body flashed, and he quickly disappeared from the passage. Half a second later, Kyle reappeared from the same spot, looking at the same passage as before, frowning slightly. Is it not even possible to escape by force? This time, he was really at his wit's end. It would be better if the ring was on my body. Kyle raised his eyebrows in annoyance. The mirror world and portal spells are specifically designed to counter this kind of fancy high-tech protection methods. Tracing back to the source, we return to that traitor Venom. Venom! Kyle snorted coldly, anger burning in his heart like a flame. At this time, inside a tempered glass bottle, a ball of black stagnant liquid suddenly began to bubble and shiver, hitting the cracks on the inner wall of the glass, causing the glass to shake and tremble continuously. Water drips through stone, and the largest crack on the inner wall of the glass finally deepened and was about to break. Right here, the door suddenly opened, and the black liquid in the cup quickly returned to calm. Tushu strode into the room with a gloomy face, picked up the glass bottle on the table with one hand, and put it back into his windbreaker pocket. This matter has alarmed the Grandmaster. The death of a top 4 challenger will probably make the Grandmaster furious. Slaughter walked to the edge of the floor-to-ceiling window on the platform and looked down at the wide, dueling arena, as if he could see Kyle spinning around in the underground passage through the floor. "As long as you exist, I will be your shadow all my life. So, I'm sorry. Please stop struggling here and end your life. I will bring your body back to Earth." Slaughter whispered hoarsely to himself. "Dry!" As if responding to its words, Kyle in the underground passage was now punching the wall of the corridor. Bang! 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 Without the vibranium arm guard, Kyle could only use his bare fist to punch the wall again and again. Cracks continued to appear on the mirror-smooth wall, just like the situation of the liquid creature in the glass bottle just now. "Master, according to the thickness of this wall, with your current punching frequency and strength, it will take about 26,405 minutes to completely break it down." Weiss used scientific data to indirectly remind Kyle that fists alone cannot break through this place. Kyle had no choice but to retract his fist. He was just trying it. As for giving up, there is no such word in his life dictionary. By the way, the ammunition and bombs stored in the card space are no less than an arsenal. We can take them out and give them a try. Kyle did what he wanted to do. With a slight movement of his mind, a bunch of item cards were drawn out and fell into his hand like playing cards and shuffled. Hydra Laser Tank. Kyle looked at the card and quickly took it back with a sigh. Although this thing was powerful, it was just too big. The underground passage was not big enough to summon it out. Be explosive 10. Kyle waved his hand, and 10 cards were summoned into packages of physical bombs, which were piled up against the outer wall of the passage. Before leaving the Earth, he didn't take much other stuff with him except for a lot of unprocessed munitions from World War II, most of which were of white quality or green quality at best. "I used them all." Kyle showed no regret at all, and the entity that drew the cards summoned a pile of explosives, filling up the outer wall of the underground passage. Don't be afraid of waste. Be afraid of not using it. A moment later, a dull and terrifying roar resounded in the underground passage, causing the entire underground prison to tremble as if an earthquake had occurred. What happened again? Is this the end? Inside the underground prison, the criminals in the cages and the guards outside the hall looked hopeless. Chapter 183. Fighting alien creatures, the rubble and dust slowly settled down in the underground passage filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder. After a sufficient amount of bombs were blasted, a burnt and damaged hole appeared on the outer wall, and the surrounding walls were covered with cracks. "It seems to be working," Kyle said, shrugging as he stepped forward again. "Yes, as long as there are 3 bombs of this power superimposed on each other, they can break through the outer wall of this corridor." Weiss agreed. "That's easy." Kyle clapped his hands and was about to continue drawing cards when suddenly a sharp sound of breaking wind came from the passage behind him. A feeling of extreme danger came to his mind and even caused a slight chill on the back of his neck. Kyle quickly lowered his head almost instinctively. Just as he made this reflexive action, a silver-white knife light passed over his head and cut off several strands of hair. Kyle dodged the fatal blow with a cold face and retaliated with his elbow towards the enemy, but the tip of his elbow missed and sank into the air. The opponent actually slashed down at the speed of sound, and without pausing for a second swing, easily dodged his superb counterattack at close range. All this happened in a flash. For an ordinary person, one would have to slow down the speed by more than 3 times to see clearly that in that instant, the two had completed a tentative game. What a fast speed! Kyle was shocked. His muscles tensed as if facing a great enemy. He turned around and glanced behind him with cold eyes. He was one of the top 4 players who had been promoted to the finals. He looked at Kyle with great interest, as if he had found a good prey. He praised him lightly. "You were able to dodge my quick attack. That's a good reaction. You are really amazing. Why did you attack me?" Kyle asked coldly. Mo Ming jumped out and slashed him with a knife. If he had met him at other times, he would have lost his temper, but now the most urgent thing was to get away first. He didn't want to be entangled by this Mo Ming challenger. Why? The strong prey on the weak, and only the strong are kings. This is the eternal law of the universe. Why should there be so many whys? The sickle man laughed, his narrow eyes showing a cruel and inhumane light. He raised his sickle and said, "I am a member of the Blade clan from the Z planet. We are a race born to fight and behead. When I first arrived on the planet Sokka, I chopped off the heads of all the creatures I saw." He licked his lips and continued. "The ruler called Grandmaster said that as long as I can win the championship, he will forgive my sins. But who wants his forgiveness? As long as I can fight against powerful creatures, cut off their heads, and taste their blood, that's enough. Master, there is no doubt that this is a perverted creature of the killing type. It attacks lives without purpose, only for its own pleasure." Weiss whispered in Kyle's ear, "I know it without you telling me." Kyle's face was indifferent, and he remained highly alert against the man with the sickle. "Things are getting troublesome. If I could cut off your head, it would be something worth commemorating." The man with the sickle suddenly took a bow step forward and slashed forward with a 2-handed sickle, accompanied by a strong wind. Kyle was already prepared and nimbly stepped to avoid it. The sickle fell on the wall behind him, cutting through it like tofu, leaving smooth grooves. If an ordinary person's body is hit by such a blow, he will be crippled if not killed. Even if a super soldier has an extraordinary physique, a piece of flesh will be cut off alive. Kyle is not a gentle and weak person. After being provoked and attacked repeatedly by the alien creatures, the anger that had been restrained surged up again. "If you want to fight, then fight." Kyle's eyes flashed coldly, and he suddenly stepped on the opponent's hand knife. The man with the sickle pulled back, but he underestimated Kyle's strength. His knife only trembled slightly and loosened, and he failed to pull it back in time. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kyle twisted his body and kicked the sickle man hard, sending him flying. The man hit the wall and floor of the passage and bounced a few times, raising a cloud of dust. But soon, under Kyle's cold gaze, the sickle man climbed up with his hand knife. A few drops of bright red blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, and he actually grinned wildly. "I was right about you, that's right. Fight with me." Kyle ignored him, reached back, quickly pulled out the card, and threw 2 black round objects at the sickle man, then quickly stepped back a few steps. "What is this?" The man with the sickle looked up and subconsciously swung the sickles in both hands, cutting the thrown object into 2 halves. The next moment, Two flames and explosive waves suddenly erupted in front of him. BD, come and fight me. The sickle man's scream sounded creepily. Who said I want to fight a monster like you with two swords in close combat? Aren't you very fast? Come and chase me, Kyle said with a mocking tone. Now he didn't have the protection of the venom coat and vibranium arm guards, and he didn't have the offensive means of the venom suit form and the sodium carbon steel sword. He must be crazy to fight with his bare hands against a monster race that was born for fighting. Understand the gap in strength between each other and use tools to make up for it. He quickly drew cards in his mind and threw high explosive grenades, shrapnel grenades, etc. forward as if they didn't need any money, sealing the passage space. Suddenly, explosions of varying sizes echoed throughout the underground passage, mixed with the angry and painful cries of the sickle man. The narrow underground passage greatly limits its speed. Grenades can have extraordinary effects inside, so it would be wrong to hide anywhere. After being bombarded frequently with grenades and bombs, the sickle man, although he quickly avoided the most dangerous central explosion area every time, was still affected, and his hair was singed black, and his whole body was covered in blood and the smell of gunpowder. I just don't believe that you have so much ammunition on you. The man with the sickle gritted his teeth, raised the no longer smooth sickle again, quickened his pace in rage. His body speed exploded to supersonic speed, and the strong wind he created dispersed the thick smoke in the area. Rushing out of the explosion area in the passage, the man with the sickle saw Kyle stopped in front of him. He was just filled with joy and raised his sickle with both hands to chop him down. But when he saw the weapon in Kyle's hand clearly, his face suddenly changed color. Don't mess with me, Kyle snorted coldly. Holding the laser machine with both hands, pulled the trigger, and several dazzling blue-white lasers shot out from the muzzle. The sickle man sped up to dodge, his body becoming blurred as a black shadow, bouncing back and forth up and down and left and right in the passage. The precise and predictable lasers all grazed his body and missed. When the speed reaches above the speed of sound, it really has the meaning of restraining all attacks. Try this. Kyle had a blank expression on his face. He held the gun in one hand and kept shooting, forcing the other party to stop moving forward. He put his other hand into his pocket to take out a card. The pocket of his shirt looked a bit like a treasure bag, and he took out a black disc-shaped object. Chapter 184. Double Kill. The sickle man's eyes were bloodshot, with a rage stuck in his chest with nowhere to release it. But his mind was highly tense, and he exerted his speed to the extreme, constantly dodging the laser shooting from the sharpshooter. Where did he get the laser gun? The man with the sickle couldn't figure it out, and he didn't have time to think about it, because in the corner of his eye, Kyle in front of him inexplicably took out a black disc from his body and threw it towards him. Another bomb? The man with the sickle gritted his teeth, jumped high, and bounced on the outer wall. The disc was much easier to dodge than the laser, and it spun past right under his feet. Pa! The black disc fell to the ground behind him, but there was no explosion. The man with the sickle was just wondering. But the next moment, an unexpected attraction pulled him downwards, causing his body, which had reached supersonic speed, to pause in the air and accidentally hit the wall. At this moment, Kyle took aim and pulled the trigger, and a dazzling, bright laser hit the man with the sickle completely. Screams echoed in the underground passage. The sickle man's chest was completely pierced by the laser. With a bloody hole, he fell straight to the floor behind him. Sticky blood quickly spread out from the wound. His eyes were wide open, and he couldn't believe until his death that he would die here in such a cowardly and depressed way, with no power to use. It's too strong to survive even the carpet bombing. Kyle breathed a sigh of relief, retracted the laser gun that had just run out of energy, leaned against the wall with a long breath, took out another similar disc, and put the adsorbent on the ground back. The final deciding factor was the gravity magnet. This high-tech device can only double the underground gravity and usually only has a noticeable effect on ordinary humans. But just now, in the life-and-death battle, the double gravity undoubtedly played an unexpected role. Even the sickle man with supersonic speed suffered a loss, which became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Well, next, Kyle stood up, but suddenly a warning from Weiss rang in his ears. Warning, a huge creature is approaching quickly. A huge creature? Kyle frowned and finally relaxed his body a little, then tensed up again and faced the front of the passage. As the ground trembled slightly, huge amounts of shadows quickly rushed out from the end of the tunnel, almost filling up the space in the underground tunnel. Its two snake-like heads were ferocious, spitting out scarlet snake tongues, and its vertical pupils looked down at Kyle coldly. Giant two-headed snake. Are you coming too? Kyle looked up unwillingly and confronted the two-headed snake coldly. After a battle, his tired body was still as imposing and powerful as ever. The championship game hasn't even started yet, and there are already 2 top 4 challengers? No, including the kid that Venom once possessed, that's 3. The two-headed snake lowered its head, and its 2 pairs of eyes glanced at the body of the sickle man on the ground. Human mockery and contempt emerged in the snake's eyes. It turned its gaze to Kyle, as if looking at a dead man. Master, there are already 20 guard spaceships in the interstellar venue above this underground prison, sealing off the ground area. Weiss issued a warning. That's easy. Kill this monster, and then we can get out. Faced with difficulties both inside and outside, Kyle was so calm that he was almost inhuman. He drew a card without any disguise, and a large laser gun appeared in his hand. When the two-headed snake saw the laser weapon, it smiled with its fangs bared and leaned back slightly. Before it showed any obvious intention to attack, its upper body suddenly shot out like a spring, and its 2 heads opened their bloody mouths and pounced towards Kyle. Kyle's face changed. He raised the laser gun and pulled the trigger without aiming. A laser immediately pierced through the mouth of one of the snake heads, and blood splattered everywhere. But the two-headed snake's attack did not stop, but became more violent and crazy, biting down fiercely with its intact bloody mouth. Kyle saw that there was nowhere to hide, so he quickly raised the gun in his hands and blocked the intact snake's mouth vertically. The two-headed snake let out a shrill roar and clenched its mouth tightly. The large metal laser gun squeaked, and the barrel bent under the terrifying bite force. Kyle held the gun in both hands, his body hanging outside the mouth of the two-headed snake. Less than 10 centimeters away, he could clearly smell the stench inside the bloody mouth. This monster actually wants to swallow me alive into its belly. Kyle looked indifferently at the gun in his hand, slowly bending, about to be unable to hold the snake's mouth. He made a decision to let go of the gun, actively stepped on the lower jaw with his feet, and pressed the upper jaw with his palms. With tons of force bursting out at 10 times the power of a human, Kyle slowly forced the snake's mouth open with brute force. Give you something good to eat. With a slight thought, the item card was pulled out, transformed into a physical high-explosive grenade, and sank into the enlarged snake's mouth. Bang! A few wisps of black smoke came out of its mouth. The giant two-headed snake twisted its body violently in pain, crawling faster and faster, running around in the underground passage where the space circulated. A monster among monsters. Kyle's scalp tingled as he swallowed the high-explosive grenade directly. The alien two-headed snake was completely fine and only felt pain in his abdomen. Oh no! Kyle's body was half-trapped in the snake's mouth, and he used his body, made of fine steel, to forcefully hold up the upper and lower jaws. But the two-headed snake seemed to suddenly have an idea and slammed its head against the outer wall. Kyle's back hit the wall, and his body was completely trapped in the snake's mouth. At the same time, the two-headed snake's bite force increased, and it slowly closed its bloody mouth and swallowed him alive. It's not that easy. Kyle held his breath, put all his strength into his limbs, and stood straight like a dragon, refusing to bend even a little. The fierce game between the two sides turned into a tug-of-war for power. The two-headed snake kept hitting the outer wall with its mouth. The outer wall was already overwhelmed by the continuous ammunition explosion, and now it finally began to crumble. Kyle resisted desperately, but his physical discomfort worsened. Fatigue and exhaustion came over him like a tide, and his physical strength began to gradually weaken. In coordination with the two-headed snake's bite and swallowing, the snake's mouth began to close, taking the advantage. Damn it! At this very moment, Kyle opened his eyes wide. The weakening of the genetic disease came too suddenly, and his extraordinary physical ability would be temporarily lost. At this critical moment of life and death, if the ability is lost, even if it is only temporarily, it will be fatal. Master, don't give up. Weiss transformed back into a mechanical life, standing on Kyle's shoulders, his hands and limbs flashing small electric lights to paralyze the snake's mouth, but it was obviously powerless to save the situation. The snake's mouth closed little by little, and just when Kyle was completely trapped in the dark snake's mouth, he suddenly remembered an item in the card space. Oh, there's that thing. Kyle's mind quickly entered the card space, and he quickly pulled out an item card with a strong purple glow. The card was suspended in the almost closed mouth of the snake, becoming the only light in his eyes. Become a physical entity, Kyle roared in his heart. The next moment, the purple card turned into a broken axe with a sharp cut. Originally, it was so horrible that it stabbed into the snake's belly with a force of 10,000 Gene. With a swish sound, the broken axe penetrated smoothly to the end. Chapter 185: The choice given by the Grandmaster outside the interstellar duel arena. Dozens of guard spaceships were suspended in the sky. On the ground of the square below, teams of alien guards equipped with high-tech equipment and fully armed surrounded the venue area in 3 outer and 3 inner circles. Be careful. There are blade and two-headed monsters that have escaped from prison. Both of them are powerful creatures that can fight against 100 at a time. When the target appears, deploy a voltage paralysis net to capture him. The deputy chief guard picked up the communicator and issued serious orders. The guards held their breath nervously, not daring to breathe, and remained alert with full concentration. Slaughter, who was at the rear of the guards, had cold eyes and warned in a deep voice. There is also a man named Kyle who is the culprit behind this underground prison riot. If you see him, you don't need to arrest him, just shoot him. Yes. The deputy general manager nodded solemnly and was about to transmit the order to the communicator. At this moment, the ground where they were standing began to shake violently. Amid the guards' exclamations, cracks appeared on the ground somewhere in the stadium square. Whole head high, along with a sharp and hoarse roar of an animal, rubble and dust exploded from the cracks and swept away in all directions. A giant black shadow suddenly broke through the wall of the passage below and raised its 2 heads violently and out of control. The two-headed monster has appeared. Get ready! The deputy general manager raised his right hand, and the guards' eyes were focused on the huge black shadow not far away, but the sudden change in the next scene made them open their mouths in surprise. I saw the giant black shadow standing high in the center of the dust wave, roaring, and then suddenly falling backwards powerlessly, hitting the ground with huge amounts of noise. What's going on? The guards opened their mouths in confusion. The dust that obscured the view gradually settled, and it was clearly visible that half of the body of the monster overlord two-headed snake was still in the passage below, while the upper body was lying lifeless on the ground. Its snake body had been cut open from the inside out by a sharp weapon, and its body was almost broken in two. Blood flowed out from the torn gap like a spring. As their eyes moved up, the guards shuddered one after another, and the slaughterer in the rear showed expressions of horror and disbelief. On the head of the two-headed snake corpse, a silver-haired young man stood there, covered in blood, with most of his clothes torn to reveal his iron body. He slowly straightened his back, looking down with cold eyes, his domineering and fierce aura like that of a Mephisto. Oh my God, he killed the two-headed monster! The guards all gasped. Not only that, look inside the underground passage. At the guards' horrified reminder, the two-headed snake broke through the collapsed outer wall and saw the body of the sickle man with a bloody hole in his chest, lying on the rubble in a tragic manner. The championship match hasn't even started yet, and 3 challengers who advanced to the top have been killed by invaders? Thinking of the tentacle children who died at the beginning of the underground prison riot, the guards at the scene felt their scalps tingling. Looking at Kyle standing with his back straight, they felt a chill all over their bodies and instinctively took a step back in fear. Being able to kill 3 monster-level creatures, he is undoubtedly a monster among monsters. But no one knew that this was the time when Kyle was at his weakest. The temporary loss of his super soldier ability coupled with the excessive consumption of physical strength due to continuous fighting, meant that any random creature could knock him down. Life is like a play, it all depends on acting. With the words "hold on," Kyle struggled to keep his balance, looking around coldly with an expressionless face, intimidating the surrounding guards and spaceships with his aura alone. For a moment, the square of the star arena fell silent, and no guard dared to attack Kyle first. What are you waiting for? Do it. With so many people, are you afraid of just one person? Tutu could no longer sit still. His body and soul were shaking with fear. He kept backing away and said while gritting his teeth. Hearing this voice, Kyle raised his eyes, looking through the layers of alien guards and landing on Massacre 20 meters away. A look of understanding appeared on his face. "Oh, so you are here." Slaughter's face turned pale instantly. It couldn't do anything to the man in front of it. This was a fatal flaw. It could only use the methods of others. As the chief steward, "I order you to shoot." Tutu growled. The guards finally woke up and aimed their laser guns at Kyle, who was in the center of the encirclement. "Weiss, hasn't the fighter jet been remotely controlled yet?" Kyle asked in a low voice. "Sorry, the fighter jet seems to be detained in a closed underground place and cannot break through." Weiss replied quickly. "Really? Then the only way is to break through by force." Kyle took a deep breath, and a biological card was quietly clamped between his two fingers. Kyle and the guards were both preparing to attack when a small spaceship suddenly came from the direction of the central building towards the square. Its exterior was painted with cool and bright dyes, and its disc-shaped body blocked the sun and cast a large shadow. Not only did the many guard spaceships suspended in the sky have no intention of blocking it, they also took the initiative to give way, leaving enough flying space and lowering their altitudes, as if they were afraid of stealing the spotlight from the small spaceship. "It's the Grandmaster is here," someone said, and then all the guards looked at the small spaceship with respect. The small spaceship was suspended in the sky. The Grandmaster himself had no intention of showing up, but he sent out a dozen aircraft to piece together the projection light to present a holographic projection of himself in 3 dimensions. Huge amounts of projections of the Grandmaster looked down at Kyle, who raised his eyes and looked at him calmly. "Grandmaster, he broke into the underground prison and killed 3 of the top 4 challengers." Slaughter shouted. "I see." The Grandmaster actually smiled, looked at Kyle, applauded, and said, "Intruder, if you were any other creature, you would have died long ago. But you are very powerful, which is what interests me very much, so I will give you 2 choices." "What choice?" Kyle asked calmly. The Grandmaster held up 2 fingers. "One is to become my enemy and face the immediate pursuit of the planet's guards. 2 is to replace those dead challengers and participate in the championship game in 2 days. I will give you 10 seconds. Kyle interrupted him. "I choose second. No matter what, as long as we can gain 2 days and get into better physical condition, we will be much more confident in whether to fight or escape. You are a smart creature, and I am optimistic about you. I hope that in 2 days, you can bring me some surprises in the duel arena." The Grand Master laughed, and the holographic projection disappeared. Kyle smiled calmly, knowing that the crisis had been temporarily resolved. The guards on the square all breathed a sigh of relief, except for the steward who slaughtered the symbiotic beings, whose face turned green and looked very ugly. Afterwards, Kyle was obediently escorted by the guards to the isolated single room in the central building. Although it still had layers of protection such as laser doors and space corridors, and he was equipped with 2 nerve paralysis control devices, the single room he lived in had its own washroom, lounge, and even activity and fitness area, as well as a series of high-tech smart facilities, and was much more luxurious than the hotel he had stayed in before. Even Kyle had not expected this change. Chapter 186, Waiting for the Battle in the central building of Sokka's main city, the Challenger's isolation single room. The shower in the bathroom sprayed hot water. Kyle lay in the bathtub with his eyes closed, tired and weak, bathing with his strong and sturdy body naked. The smell of blood and ammunition gradually faded away under the constant washing. His heart was beating violently, and the wounds on his body began to heal naturally under the stimulation, leaving not a single scar on his bronze-colored body. Kyle opened his eyes and tried to clench his fists lightly, and the lost strength returned quietly again. It was a close call this time. Kyle sighed. He almost fell into a desperate situation where he had to fight to the death. This is not a solution. Genetic diseases are becoming more and more serious, and we will never be completely at peace until the problem is eradicated. The most frustrating thing is not encountering an undefeatable enemy, but being able to defeat the enemy, but having serious problems inside your own body. Oh. Following the sound of some metal instrument breaking, a small mechanical life form walked into the bathroom, holding a clean towel and bath towel in both hands, and gnawing on a mechanical device similar to a surveillance probe in its mouth, with the thread still hanging out of its mouth. Kyle stood up, wiped himself clean, wrapped a towel around his lower body, and walked out of the bathroom. Weiss jumped after him, swallowed the wire, and reported. All surveillance cameras in the open or hidden corners of this isolated room have been removed. Well done. How's the thing I asked you to investigate going? Kyle asked as he sat on the sofa in the hall. Although we only hacked into 1% of the building's intelligence system through the smart devices here, we did find another isolation room 5 floors away from this floor. The protection measures there are more than 3 times more stringent than here. Weiss said slowly. Kyle stroked his smooth chin and pondered. Is it impossible to completely hack into the intelligence system of this building? The only information I know about this planet system is the fighter's own computer system database. Plus, this building's intelligent control system is very advanced. If I break in by force, there's a 99% chance that I'll be discovered and tracked down. Weiss spread his hands humanely. There's no need to completely hack into the entire building system. Just hack into another isolation room. I want to know what kind of creature lives in there. Kyle said in a deep voice. If I'm not mistaken, the other isolated room is undoubtedly occupied by the champion creature that has dominated the Saka Duel arena for the past 6 months. About half a year ago, it coincided with the time when Lee and her brother found the broken axe. So, is the champion creature related to the broken artifact of the Acer? Kyle had a real feeling. Maybe the champion creature has a suitable ability card that can help him solve the genetic disease problem in one fell swoop and break through his current physical condition to usher in evolution. This is also the main reason why he still takes the risk and chooses to stay here. If he wanted temporary safety, Kyle could just break through the isolation room in the central building after his strength and injuries recovered, find a fighter plane or spaceship, and drive into the giant wormhole in the sky to leave the planet. I'll do my best. Weiss nodded and suddenly seemed to realize something. He quickly jumped onto Kyle's shoulder and shrank and transformed into a nerve-paralyzing device on the side of his neck. Its movements were smooth and fluid, and it was completed in less than half a second. As soon as the process was completed, the smart door of the isolation room slowly opened. I'm here to deliver lunch. A young girl dressed as a waitress's dress walked into the isolation room cautiously with a plate of food in her hands, lowering her head and not daring to look at Kyle on the sofa. Put it on the table. Kyle stared at the maid and suddenly felt a little familiar, but he didn't know where this familiarity came from. The table was only 3 meters away from Kyle. The maid hesitated for a moment, then quickly stepped closer with the plate in hand. The girl's hair was pure black, her skin was crystal white, her facial features were delicate, and her appearance was very close to that of a human, except that her ears were slightly pointed. Her figure, wrapped in a maid's dress, could not hide her gracefulness. When she got within 3 meters of him and saw the cards appearing on his body, Kyle's face suddenly showed realization. Then I'll be leaving. The maid seemed to have noticed Kyle's gaze and quickly put down the food plate and was about to leave quickly. Wait a minute. Kyle called her, patted the seat next to his sofa, smiled calmly and said, "Why don't you come and sit down? We've known each other for a long time. I don't remember who you met." Yi Ji was about to leave, so Kyle added calmly, "I helped you escape from the city guards. Have you forgotten so quickly? I wonder what the consequences would be if the Grand Master knew that his attendant was a criminal." Yi Ji's body froze, and she turned around to look at Kyle, who was only wearing a bath towel. Her face changed slightly as she said, "It's you, the guy in the black leopard combat suit? Why? It can't be me?" Kyle shrugged. The girl in front of him was actually one of the criminal gangs that had the unawakened Proxima Midnight Elf genes. You're a ruthless person. I heard that you broke into the underground prison and killed 3 creatures that advanced to the top 4. Now this news is temporarily blocked and is only spread among us. If it gets out, it will probably cause a sensation on the whole planet. Yi Ji sighed, knowing that Kyle was the one who escaped the guard's pursuit with her. She no longer had the timid look she pretended to have before. It was just an accident. Kyle narrowed his eyes, still brooding over Venom's betrayal, as if there was a thorn in his flesh that could not be erased. Your current situation is very bad, you know? 2 days later, you'll be the only challenger to challenge the defending champion Demon King. Yi Ji kindly reminded. I know. Kyle nodded calmly. Yi Ji said solemnly. Even if you can defeat a monster like the 2-headed monster, you are still no match for the Demon King. In the past 6 months, the Demon King has defeated every challenger he encountered. He basically killed them with one strike and never showed his true strength. Kyle looked at Yi Ji and said thoughtfully, if you want to help me, then help me collect some information. Why should I help you? What's the benefit? Yi Ji asked. The evil-minded man was not as harmless as he appeared. If you don't help me, I will tell the Grandmaster that you are a criminal. Kyle had the leverage over Yi Ji, and with just one sentence, he hit her soft spot. You. Yi Ji stamped her feet and asked unhappily, what information do you want? I want to know the detailed information about the leader of the guards. Kyle said coldly, even if you have to leave this planet, you must clean up your mess first. Chapter 187. Challenger. Tyrant Kyle. 2 days passed. Tonight is the much-anticipated championship match. With more than half an hour left before the opening time, the alien residents of the entire planet are celebrating with joy, some marching through the streets with cheering flags, some flying into the sky in their spaceships, and they all flock to the Interstellar Duel Arena to compete for the best viewing spot. At this time, central building, fitness area with challenger isolation rooms. Kyle's shoulder-length silver hair has been cut into a short haircut. He is wearing a pair of shorts with his strong and sturdy upper body naked. He is doing warm-up exercises with huge amounts of barbells in his hands. His arm muscles are bulging as if they were made of steel, and the half-ton barbells are easily moved back and forth like toys. Master, everything is ready. Weiss, who was on his neck and transformed into a paralysis nerve control device, notified. Okay, Kyle nodded and casually threw the barbell down. The heavy barbell hit the floor with a deafening thud. As soon as Yi Ji opened the laser protection door and walked into the isolation room, she was startled and screamed. Kyle wiped his sweat with a towel, raised his eyes to look at Yi Ji, and said calmly, it's not time to deliver food. Why are you here? Aren't you afraid of being suspected by the Grandmaster's guards? How come you are still so calm? Yi Ji rolled her eyes at him unhappily. The girl had a slender and fair face, and her specific age was completely invisible due to the longevity of the elf genes. Why don't you stay calm? You're just trying to lose your composure. Kyle shrugged and said jokingly, I thought you asked me to provide information because you wanted to find a chance to escape from here within these 2 days. Now the championship match is about to start. Why are you still staying here? Yi Ji felt anxious for him, suddenly opened her eyes wide, and said in disbelief, you are not really going to participate in the championship match tonight? Why not? Kyle narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Yi Ji shook her head. You're crazy. You're really crazy. You have such thoughts because you haven't seen how terrifying the Demon King is. No, on the contrary, it is precisely because I know how powerful he is that I want to stay here. Kyle chuckled, his face serious and solemn, his hands clenched quietly, and he was far from being as relaxed as he looked. Over the past 2 days, he and Weiss have still not found a specific and reliable method to break through the multiple defenses of the central building to spy on and actually contact the champion Demon King in another isolation room. However, he basically grasped the information of the Venom symbiote's general manager. However, after the entity, trying here, summoned the broken axe, as if due to the short distance between them, the broken axe showed a subtle divine reaction to the creatures in the isolation layer several floors above. There is a nearly 80% chance that the true identity of the champion Demon King is a member of the Acer tribe, to which Thor belongs. Knowing this message, Kyle would stay without hesitation no matter how dangerous it was, even if he had to make enemies with all the creatures on the planet. Didn't he leave the Earth and enter the starry sky just for this day? The Acer's ability cards have always been Kyle's first choice. As long as the body has Protoss genes, the physique will undoubtedly evolve again and reach a higher level. And it will solve the problem of the body's genes collapsing and reorganizing due to radiation in one fell swoop. This is truly a one step to hell, one step to heaven situation. A gateway where danger and opportunity coexist. Everything depends on this time. Kyle took a deep breath. His eyes were determined, and his aura continued to rise. Must win. Even if the enemy is a god, he cannot be timid and retreat. He wants to bet everything in his future on this battle. Half an hour later, night fell as expected, and the thick darkness enveloped the main city of Sokka below. At this time, in the interstellar duel venue, the lights projected by countless spaceships and the venue made the area where the venue was located as bright as day. Under the carnival shouts of hundreds of thousands of planetary creatures, the bustling voices condensed into a substantial sound wave, impacting the empty and repaired duel ground below. In the audience, and Lee, her two siblings, and Bai Bo were sitting next to each other in the front seats. Sister and Lee, it's been more than 2 days since that day, and there's still no news from Mr. Kyle? Bai Bo's face looked heavy, and for several days it looked like he was really worried about this. His white hair was dull and lifeless. I don't know much. Lee shook her head helplessly and sighed. I was also driven out of the square by the guards that day. Although I have been asking the Sokka guards for information over the past 2 days, the guards were terrified when they heard Mr. Kyle's name and dared not reveal too much. I only know that Mr. Kyle is safe now, but I don't know exactly where he is. What exactly happened that day? Didn't Mr. Kyle just go to visit the Challenger? Bai Bo gritted his teeth and was about to say something when suddenly, as the lights of the interstellar venue flickered, a dozen small aircraft flew into the sky above the duel arena. The game is about to start. Bai Bo changed the subject and focused his attention on the duel arena along with Lee's siblings and the millions of alien spectators in the audience. The image of the master constructed by the holographic projection aircraft was blurred with light and shadow. He looked around the audience, opened his arms in welcome, and said with a smile, "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening." The audience immediately responded with waves of enthusiastic cheers. Grandmaster said slowly, "I know everyone has been looking forward to tonight's championship match. But before the match begins, that is, before the challenger is invited, I want to tell you something very important." Upon hearing this, the audience in the auditorium consciously lowered their cheers and looked at the Grandmaster's projection in confusion. Is there anything more important than the championship game? First of all, the semifinals will be skipped. As soon as the Grandmaster's voice fell, the audience was in an uproar, with confusion and depression on their faces. Don't worry, the Grandmaster smiled and continued. The reason why the semifinals were skipped is because 2 days ago, an intruder broke into the underground prison and killed all 3 of the challengers who were promoted to the semifinals. What? This news was like a bomb, shocking the alien audience in the audience and making them gasp. A creature killed 3 top 4 challengers alone? How is this possible? Could it be that? And Lee and Bai Bo looked at each other, with the same expression of incomparable shock on their faces. The invader's record undoubtedly shows that he has the strength to challenge the defending champion. So this championship match will be between the challenger and the devil. The Grandmaster took a deep breath and said loudly with a stronger tone, "Now, let's welcome tonight's only challenger with applause. Tyrant Kyle." Chapter 188. Duel with God. At the duel arena, beams of light shone down and footsteps were heard from the underground passage leading inside from the main entrance. Amid the applause and cheers of the alien audience, Kyle took powerful steps out and stood tall on the vast field, his eyes solemn and serious. He held a machine-processed sword and shield in his hands, and his perfect human physique was dressed in silver metal armor provided by the Sokka guards, like an immortal god of war who had experienced the file-size war. "Oh my God, it's really Mr. Kyle." In the audience area, looking at the figures ready for battle in the venue, and Lee and her brother, and Bo, were completely speechless for a moment. On the suspended rooftop high above the interstellar duel arena, in the viewing room where the Grandmaster and his confidants were, Slaughter sat in a seat close to the Grandmaster, looking down expressionlessly at Kyle, and whispered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "I know your strength very well. It is indeed terrifyingly strong. But no matter what, you cannot defeat the defending creature of a race far beyond Superman." As if hearing its sound, the tempered glass bottle in the pocket of Slaughter's windbreaker trembled slightly, and the bottle body, which was already full of cracks, quietly cracked again. "All right, the challenger has come out. Now, let me invite tonight's protagonist, the defender." The Grandmaster was very good at creating an atmosphere, and the popularity of the defending team had already been accumulated. So in an instant, there was a burst of applause and cheers that were 10 times greater than Kyle's. A human-shaped shadow slowly appeared from the entrance of the passage opposite the main entrance. In the duel arena, Kyle looked nervous. His palms holding the sword and shield were sweating. He stared at the tall figure who was about to break through the door, and he could keenly feel the strong sense of oppression coming over his heart. The biological overlord who has defended the championship arena for 6 consecutive times. The well-deserved uncrowned king. He is the Devil King Kratos, the Grandmaster said excitedly outside the arena, and the tall figure just walked out of the passageway. He was a tall and mighty bald man with a rough and bold face, red lines painted on his left eye, a thick black beard on his chin, iron chains wrapped around the backs of his hands, and a strong body covered with a primitive leather jacket that could not be considered protective gear. The moment he appeared on the field, a strong and heavy aura swept over, immediately causing a wave of carnival among the audience. "Demon King! Demon King! Demon King!" Kratos ignored the shouts of the audience, strode forward, looked directly at Kyle standing in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "My opponent this time is you." "Who else but me?" Kyle's heart was beating violently, and he gasped slightly to hide his uncontrollable fear. It's like a cat or dog encountering a lion or tiger. They are far higher in the food chain than themselves, and even their blood and genes are throbbing. Is it true that the creature he is going to face and defeat is a divine creature? Please enjoy the game. The Grandmaster's holographic projection disappeared, announcing the official start of the championship duel. "You must strike first. Take the initiative in the battle." Kyle's eyes became firm and resolute. He stepped back with both feet and stomped heavily on the air. A series of white waves burst out from the spot. The energy tide was turbulent, and his speed soared to supersonic speed in an instant. Air sprint. Auxiliary skill for burst of linear acceleration. Kratos stood there motionless, as if he had not yet reacted. In less than 0.1 seconds, Kyle's figure had blurred over a distance of 20 meters and arrived in front of the opponent. While in the air, Kyle held the sword tightly in his right hand, and with a burst of sprint, he suddenly chopped down at Kratos' exposed neck. He was very aware of the difference in strength between them, and took the initiative to seize the opportunity. This sword strike contained all his strength, 10 times the extreme that a human's physique can reach. Bite! As the long sword just landed on Kratos' neck, Kyle's face was horrified, and he felt his palms shaking violently. The long sword trembled and almost slipped out of his hand, just like it was cut on a hard vibranium shield and couldn't penetrate. How is it possible? Kyle's mind went blank. He was confident in his burst of air sprint, and even God would not be able to avoid it. However, he did not expect that the slash that was expected to cause at least serious injuries would not break the defense. At this distance, with his mind focused, the ability card on the opponent was also revealed. Nearly 1,000 white, green, and blue ability cards appeared and rotated around Kratos' body, almost blinding Kyle's eyes. One of the ability cards shines brightly above the bald head like a god king floating in the air. Protoss Gene, the original gene of the Protoss. Rare purple ability card unawakened. The race of creatures in the Marvel Universe that is at the forefront of evolution is collectively called the gods. They have extremely excellent deified genes, a lifespan of at least thousands of years, and their physical qualities such as strength, willpower, physique, and speed are all among the best among all alien creatures. He possesses divine power in his body, which he can use to strengthen his attacks, cast spells, and even bless divine weapons to exert unimaginable power. After gradually awakening the original power, each member of the God Clan masters different laws of power, ranging from thunder, fire, ice, and death. Current status: extractable, needs to be within 1 meter and continuously extracted for 3 hours. And the rare purple prefix is unique and can only be extracted once. Warning: Kratos' divine power focuses on strengthening his physique. All this happened in a flash. Kyle chopped Kratos' neck with all his strength, and a few drops of blood oozed out of his skin. If the attack fails, he will retreat quickly. What a fast burst of speed, and you can actually hurt me. You are the first challenger in the past 6 months. Kratos grinned at Kyle, his sandbag-sized fist glowing with a faint golden-red divine power, and punched Kyle's chest in the air. Kyle's face turned pale, and he had no time to distance himself. He could only hastily raise his shield and block it in front of him. As soon as he made this move, Kyle felt a terrifying force pouring into the shield, pressing his hands against his chest with his hands bent, and his whole body was thrown backwards like a kite with its string cut off. Bang! Kyle flew backwards more than 30 meters, his back hitting the edge wall of the duel arena. The outer wall collapsed, leaving a deep pit, with rubble and dust flying everywhere. In the surrounding audience seats, the alien audiences all opened their mouths wide and fell silent in surprise and shock. From the beginning of the game, Kyle launched a sudden slash. Kratos was hit in the neck with a sword and punched back, and Kyle flew backwards. This series of battles took place within 1 second. The gods are fighting. This is the gods fighting. Should we say they are worthy of being gods? Kyle coughed a few times, bright red blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, and he climbed up from the rubble in a panic. There was a huge amount of fist marks in the middle of the metal shield on the ground next to him, and it was cracked and obviously could not block the second punch. But the battle has just begun. Kyle looked at the invincible Kratos in the arena, his eyes showing his unyielding spirit. He decisively used the backup plan he had prepared in the past 2 days. VS, Iron Man mode. Ready to start. Chapter 189, Iron Suit Mode. Do you want to continue? Kratos calmly clenched his fists and walked forward step by step. He seemed to be burning with a faint divine flame. Even the audience outside the duel arena could feel the strong sense of oppression. Mr. Kyle, Sisters Onley and by Bo covered their mouths and closed their eyes, unable to bear to watch the brutal fight that was about to happen. It's not that Kyle is too weak, but that Kratos, who is defending the ring, is too strong. So strong that it's suffocating and desperate. Under the gazes of countless people, in the dust that slightly covered Kyle's figure at the duel venue, a small round of dazzling daylight suddenly burst into light. If you get close to Kyle now, you will definitely see that he is holding the last film money made by Howard in his left hand, which is also the core of the Iron Man suit. Iron suit transforms. Activate. Weiss narrated softly. Starting from the small paralysis nerve control device, the mechanical parts began to deform rapidly and regularly, and the wires were inserted into the chest of the adsorbent in the metal mechanical armor, turning into a concave mechanical slot. Kyle raised his hand and pressed the film money onto the deformed mechanical slot of Vess. Film money and Whistler like the foundation and the switch. When the two are put together, there is an essential leap forward immediately. Sizzling white electric light was emitted from the mechanical slots, transmitted to the metal armor and sword on the body, and even the cracked metal shield on the ground. These metal mechanical equipments were quickly pieced together and transformed with enough film money energy, and transformed into iron battle suits that fit the body surface. Sorry to have kept you waiting. The battle continues. A calm and indifferent voice sounded, and in fact it took less than 5 seconds for a silver Iron Man with a chest glowing with daylight energy to stand on the duel field in Kyle's place. Between humans and gods, there is a huge chasm in individual strength that cannot be easily overcome. Just like the difference between blue and purple abilities, there is a whole level difference which cannot be made up in a short time. Kyle understood this principle very well. and knew in advance that he was about to face an opponent of the same level as Thor. Since he chose to stay and fight, how could he not be prepared in advance? If mutations are not enough, equipment will make up for it. The difference between a mortal and a god may be a suit of steel armor. In the rooftop room at the top of the Interstellar Stadium, Massacre could no longer sit still and stood up, protesting loudly to the Grandmaster next to him. Foul! This is an absolute foul. The champion actually brought high-tech weapons into the game. Why? Didn't you select the metal armor and sword and shield from the armory 2 days ago and have them delivered? Transforming weapons is also one of the challenger's strengths. The Grandmaster smiled faintly and looked at the Iron Man below with interest. I thought it would end quickly. This way, the game will be much more interesting. Interesting. Kratos grinned, not minding Kyle's iron armor. He squatted down with a little strength, sprinted and leaped, and his tall and strong body rushed forward like a heavy artillery shell. Master, the material of this iron armor is still not enough to withstand the opponent's frontal attack. Weiss analyzed the battle situation and activated the combat assistance. Of course I know. Kyle looked at Kratos leaping over, took a deep breath, and the jet engines on his feet and palms burst out a scorching and dazzling energy tail flame, increasing his speed, which was already 10 times faster than that of a human, even more. So, I still have to take the initiative to attack. He dodged quickly and flew to a low altitude. The next moment, Kratos fell heavily to the ground. The stomping of his feet and the elbowing of his arms caused the explosive impact force to cause the fragile hard floor within a 5-meter range with him to crack and collapse. Kyle turned his hands and feet, and the Iron Man's body drifted and turned back at low altitude, falling at high speed towards Kratos below. At the same time, he punched down with his right hand. A bunch of small engine probes extended from the side of the arm of the battlesuit, spraying energy in the opposite direction to assist the punch. Just in time, Kratos seemed to have eyes on his back. He turned around, raised his eyes, and swung his left fist upwards as well. Iron Fist versus Divine Punch. All the engines in Iron Man's body were powering the jets, and Kratos stood firm and motionless. During the stalemate, the floor under his feet once again shattered like a spider web. Kyle raised the corner of his mouth and quickly raised his other hand. Under Kratos' surprised gaze, he aimed the engine light at the center of his metal palm and fired a beam of blazing laser cannon at close range. Bang! Kratos was immediately hit by the laser and thrown away. The Iron Man's engine roared and burst into flames, unwilling to miss this opportunity to pursue the victory. In Iron Man mode, the main means of attack is cannon fire. Kyle had a grim face as he flew in the air, raising his pair of metal hands like 2 gun barrels. He simply aimed and continuously fired beams of lasers that cut through the sky. The aftermath of the energy explosion densely submerged Kratos' body. The audience in the surrounding auditoriums were stunned. In previous years, the duel field was basically close combat between creatures, but today's game started with a unique and strange battle. Inside the duel arena, engines roared, lasers shot. The energy flames of daylight covered the area where Kratos was, and rolling air waves and dust filled the interior of the interstellar duel arena. Kyle hovered in the low air until Phil Money's energy was half exhausted. The metal engines on his palms were burned red, and even the steel was melted by the continuous laser cannon fire. Only then did he stop attacking with a slight breath. Weiss, was the attack effective? Kyle asked solemnly, looking at the smoke in front of him. Based on the test results, be careful. Weiss's voice rang out rapidly, and the next moment, an iron chain shot out from the front and bottom at high speed, wrapping around Kyle's left calf and locking it. Oh no! Kyle's face changed slightly, and the engines of his feet exploded, subconsciously trying to fly higher to increase his altitude. Clang clang! The links of the chain were tightly taut, and no matter how much the engine of the Iron Man's suit vibrated and roared, Kyle could not move up half a millimeter for a while, let alone break free from the damn chain. Got you. On the ground below, Kratos' figure gradually emerged in the dissipating smoke, and he grinned coldly and majestically. He looked disheveled and his body was charred, But the injuries were only superficial. His hand was holding the other end of the chain. "Come down!" Kratos grabbed the chain with both hands and pulled it down suddenly and hard. He turned it quickly, dragging Kyle around like a windmill for 3 circles, and then swung it straight to the ground. With pure power far exceeding tons, with just one violent swing of the chain, half of the body of the silver-armored Iron Man sank into the ground. The core film money on his chest dimmed slightly, and some parts of the steel armor began to crack. The mechanical suit was made of nothing but steel and had no impact-absorbing function. Most of the impacts were borne by Kyle inside. This is just the beginning. Kratos was full of vigor, and after taking the initiative, he swung the chains up and down with his strong arms, smashing Kyle, who was covered in the iron armor, into the ground again and again. Chapter 190. Super Kill, Live Towards Death. Bang! 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 During the battle, the iron chains clanged, and the sound of steel armor hitting the ground continued violently. Kratos completely transformed into the cold-blooded and ruthless god of war, and with his power absolutely superior to that of humans, he smashed Kyle to the ground again and again, as if he was playing with his opponent. Wow! Bible crawled in Onley's arms, his tail raised in panic, not daring to look any further. The iron armor was smashed until it was covered with cracks. Drops of blood flowed out from the gaps in the armor. The iron mask covering the face was cracked in half, revealing Kyle's bloodless face inside. Kratos swung the chain again, dragging Kyle into the sky. At this moment, the metal arm raised slightly, and the palm engine that was on the verge of being scrapped emitted a laser beam, accurately hitting the middle of the chain. The chain broke, and Kyle was thrown free. When he was falling freely close to the ground, energy waves sprayed out from the bottom of his feet in time, and he stopped steadily and landed on the ground. Master, the energy is leaking out. There is less than one layer left. Moreover, this deformed and pieced-together iron armor is on the verge of collapse. It can no longer carry out high-load combat for a long time. Waisalu responded worriedly. Not only the armor, I'm almost done too, ugh. Kyle spat out a mouthful of blood and spit, looking coldly at Kratos in front of him, thinking, I can't hide it anymore. Activate the super kill of the iron armor mode. Yes, Weiss immediately understood what Kyle meant. During the 2 days in the isolation room of the central building, Kyle and Weiss collected intelligence, built simple iron suits, and used data to conduct no less than 1,000 combat simulations on the computer. There is only one way to defeat higher races like gods. That is the ultimate killer. Whether I win or lose depends entirely on this one move. Kyle took a deep breath, shook his palms, and discarded the scrapped engine on the palm of the iron armor. Kratos saw this and asked calmly, Why? Have you given up? Of course not. Kyle smiled coldly, and a tide of energy suddenly burst out from under his feet, leaving a series of white waves and rushing forward. Air dash. Is it the same trick again? I won't suffer the same loss a second time. Otherwise, I would be unworthy of the title of God of War. Kratos' mind moved, and the moment he saw Kyle's figure disappear, he reacted quickly and punched forward. The burst speed of the aerial sprint can indeed be considered extremely fast, but the biggest flaw is that it can only sprint in a straight line according to the original direction. Just as Kratos had guessed, Kyle's figure flickered and blurred, and accompanied by a whistling wind, he appeared just in front of the punch. From a third-party perspective, it looked as if Kyle had proactively hit Kratos' fist with his chest. The audience in the auditorium exclaimed, and Kratos grinned. It's all over. The fist slammed into Kyle's iron suit's chest, right in the middle of the film money slot that was glowing white, which was also the body of Vis. Under the vibranium's characteristic of absorbing kinetic energy, the terrifying fist force could not be stopped from spreading and exploding, and the iron suit was cracked all over and was about to collapse completely. Kyle coughed out blood and shattered lung fragments without even a groan of pain. He kept his feet on the floor without retreating at all, his eyes flashing with a glimmer of hope and determination. This is the moment. Kyle ignored his own injuries, stretched out his hands like lightning, and pressed 2 small nerve-paralyzing devices on Kratos' shoulders. He yelled, Weiss! At the same time, Vess has used radio waves to simulate the sending of a start signal. The paralysis nerve control device has been activated, and white electric light has enveloped Kratos, penetrating and paralyzing his inner body. One shot is enough to temporarily paralyze Thor, making him unable to resist, not to mention the combined effect of 2 shots. Kratos opened his eyes wide, his powerful and unshakable body trembled, and finally he fell straight down facing Kyle. Kyle put his hands on Kratos' lower abdomen, and the engine under the iron suit started to glow, and suddenly lifted up and flew, actually pushing Kratos' body under him, and flew up into the sky. But in the blink of an eye, in front of the horrified eyes of countless onlookers in the stadium, Kyle, carrying Kratos' body without mobility, flew over the 100-meter height of the interstellar stadium, past countless suspended spectator spaceships, and rushed straight into the vast starry sky without any sign of stopping. "Oh my God, it's crazy, really crazy." Yi Ji, who was on a spaceship, sat down on the deck with a dazed look in her eyes. What does he want to do? Massacre stood up again, looked up in shock, and looked at Kyle, who had turned into a brilliant star in the sky. Sitting next to him, the smile on Grandmaster's face disappeared. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes filled with doubt and uncertainty, feeling that things were beyond his control. Directly above the duel arena, 1,000 meters in the air, flames were spurting from the tails of Kyle's iron armor, and he held up Kratos, whose body was still twitching slightly, with his hands. He flew faster and faster like a rocket, constantly increasing in altitude at supersonic speed. "Master, the energy of Phil money has been reduced to less than half. If you continue like this, you won't have enough energy to return to the ground safely," Weiss warned. Hearing this, Kyle smiled calmly and said with unprecedented confidence, "Don't worry about landing. Drive the engine to maximum horsepower and keep going." "Yes." Vess followed his order and drove the engine of the Iron Man's suit to the maximum. Suddenly, the roar of machinery and burning energy resounded all the way through the sky. 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters, 5,000 meters. "This height is not high enough. Keep going," Kyle growled, braving the cold night wind and climbing higher and higher. 6,000 meters, 7,000 meters, 9,000 meters. At this altitude, we have almost left the atmosphere of the planet Sokka. The surrounding area is full of colorful space wormholes, and the space and air everywhere are distorted and chaotic. The tail flames died down, and the iron suit completely melted in the freezing temperature. Vess struggled to transform and control it, and the suit collapsed into countless pieces of iron clinging to ice debris, revealing Kyle inside. Kyle's eyebrows were frosted, his breathing was labored, and he slightly adjusted his posture in the air, holding Kratos' legs tightly with both hands and pointing the big bald head downwards. Then, the two of them fixed themselves together and began to fall from a height of 9,000 meters. Kratos' body trembled, and his will gradually began to clear, but it was too late. 8,000 meters, 6,000 meters, 4,000 meters, 2,000 meters. The speed of falling was getting faster and faster, and the wind pressure was causing Kyle pain, but he just stared at the interstellar venue that was getting bigger and bigger in front of him, and his eyes never moved away. "Master, you are going too fast. If you fall to the ground like this, even if the enemy cushions your fall, you will most likely die on the spot." Weiss transformed into a headset, fixed it on Kyle's ear, and reminded him nervously, "If we don't take risks by doing this, how can we have a chance to defeat the creatures of the God Clan?" Kyle laughed heartily, looking at the stadium and the venue getting closer and closer below, and closed his eyes in enlightenment. This is the real way to live towards death. Bet your entire future on this one strike. Chapter 191: Venom Returns. Ultimate full coverage. In the audience seats of the Interstellar Stadium, hundreds of thousands of alien spectators, even the Masters, all raised their heads and stared at the night sky in horror and concern, where Kyle and the other man were no longer visible. Everyone held their breath, not wanting to miss even a single detail of this epic battle, and the entire huge venue suddenly became silent. Then, the black spot grew bigger and bigger, falling straight down to the duel arena at a very high speed, with no sign of stopping or slowing down. Here it comes! Here it comes! As the audience exclaimed in shock and wide-eyed, Kyle and Kratos, fixed together as one, blurry like a stream of light, suddenly crashed into the center of the duel arena. Bang! Like a falling star, the concrete ground collapsed, and the powerful shock wave of the fall directly blew away the gravel and dust within a radius of 10 meters. The Interstellar Stadium suddenly fell silent. When the dust settled, one could clearly see that in the middle of the open and flat dueling field, a 5-meter diameter, bottomless hole appeared in the dueling field. This visually impactful scene made countless creatures' scalps tingle and their bodies and minds tremble slightly with horror. My God! Is there any living thing that can survive here? Maybe they're all dead. So what is this, a draw? The audience blushed and couldn't help but whisper to each other. No matter what, this is a battle that will be recorded in the history of the Sokka Star Duel Arena. Russell! At this moment, a slight sound was heard from the deep pit. Amid the audience's doubtful gazes, a sturdy hand slowly stretched out from the pit, leaned on the edge of the pit, and climbed up with difficulty. It was the Demon King Kratos, but at this moment, his whole body could only be described in one word: miserable. The big bald head was covered with bright bloodstains, as if it had bloomed flowers. The blood flowed down and sank into the deep eye sockets. The rough face looked hideous and terrifying. His clothes were torn, and his body was covered with gravel and dirt. He looked so miserable and was completely different from the majestic god of war he was before. What a crazy guy. Kratos climbed out of the pit with great effort and stood on the edge dizzy, looking down into the deep pit, and said seriously, "Among the lower creatures of the human race, I would like to call you the strongest. But obviously, our fight ends here." Kratos shook his head slightly and fell from a height of nearly 10,000 meters. If it weren't for a god like him with an outstanding physique and divine power protecting his body, even the higher-level creatures would have been smashed into a pile of meat paste. This move is so crazy that it can no longer be simply called a move. It is a kind of awareness to kill 1,000 enemies and lose 800 of your own. And it is almost a determination to risk your own death to perform the exercise. Kratos turned around and opened his arms to the audience. An enthusiastic carnival sounds broke out to meet the shouts. "Mr. Kyle, is he dead?" Baibo opened his mouth wide, not daring to believe this fact. "It should be." Emily nodded with a sad face. Just as she was about to say something to comfort him, she suddenly seemed to see something, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Baibo, look, what is that?" Likewise, most of the audience stopped cheering and stared at the deep pit behind Kratos in surprise. Kratos noticed their abnormality and turned around. The next moment, even his pupils suddenly contracted. I saw a hand slowly stretched out from the deep pit, with black liquid constantly pulsating on the arm, covering it and transforming into a layer of smooth and tough keratin membrane. With his hands on the ground and a little leverage, a tall figure jumped out nimbly and landed lightly on the other side of the deep pit. Its tall, human-like body is dark in color, with muscular contours that are extremely wild and streamlined. Its narrow and long eyes are scarlet, and it has an evil grin, making it look like a black demon crawling out of hell. "Who are you?" Kratos frowned, looking at the creature in front of him who didn't know its fate. His body subconsciously tensed up, and he felt a sense of danger in his heart for the first time. "I just blew your bald head off, and now you're asking me who I am." The dark creature grinned and spread his hands. "But it's true. This form and even the aura have changed. Let me formally introduce myself. I'm Tyrant Kyle." In the rooftop room at the top of the duel arena, the Grandmaster stood up, looked at Kyle, whose appearance had changed drastically, and then looked at Tushu, whose face was pale, and asked in a deep voice, "What on earth is going on? Did something rush out of you just now?" Slaughter's face was extremely ugly. He remained silent. There were still shards of the shattered glass in his windbreaker pocket. He roared inwardly, "Venom, you finally chose to go back to him and betrayed me, who was once one with you." In the duel arena, Kyle stretched out his limbs, and the long-lost state of full coverage of venom, a feeling of comprehensive amplification surged into his heart. Just now, At the moment when he was about to fall to the ground from the sky, he really thought that he would most likely die. However, at the moment of passing over the rooftop of the Interstellar Stadium, a ball of black liquid suddenly bounced out and wrapped around and protected his body. I never thought that the one who saved him in the end was Venom, and the one who betrayed him before was another derivative symbiote. Kyle sighed secretly. After integrating with Venom, his consciousness was intertwined with Venom's thoughts, and he instantly knew about Venom's split. Venom and him had experienced the Second World War on Earth for a long time, and negative emotions such as killing, cruelty, and ruthlessness had long been hidden deep in their body. Later, under the influence of the space gem, these frantic and restless emotions evolved and split into the second symbiote. This is the reason for the massacre. Carnage can be said to be the joint creation of Kyle and Venom's negative thoughts, so he is more powerful and has more subjective consciousness. Arriving on this planet half a year in advance, Carnage and Venom were able to survive by constantly relying on the alien residents, but later they had huge amounts of disagreements. Venom wanted to find and wait for Kyle, while Carnage wanted to go out on his own and become a new and powerful creature. Due to this difference in ideas, the two finally broke up completely. Carnage is a powerful being who can take full control of the host's body and has imprisoned Venom, an ambitious chief of the Control Guard who is poised to take over the Grandmaster's position one day. I wronged you. Kyle smiled with relief. He could feel that Venom was even more innocent and pure than before, constantly expressing his joy to him. Just like the night he drew the Venom card. Speaking of cards, the Venom Symbiote Bio card at this time is very different from before. Adult Venom Symbiote, a symbiote that has grown to a certain extent. Purple Creature card. Venom does not need to combine with the host and can survive on its own. Symbiosis can greatly increase the host's strength and ability. Its weaknesses are ultrasound and high temperature. Once they reach adulthood, the growth potential of their venom decreases significantly. Currently mastered abilities: quick learning, transformation into any clothing, defense immunity to bullets, liquid self-healing repair, memory detection and interception, gliding flight, dark claws, climbing, walking, long whip, hitting, sharp blade, and thousands of tentacles. The number of hosts it has coexisted with is currently 108. The larger the number, the stronger the venom. Chapter 192. Thousands of tentacles, ending everything. Adult venom, in its current fully covered symbiotic integrate form, might actually be able to defeat the injured and weakened divine creature. Kyle thought to himself. He could feel the sufficient power increase by clenching his fist. Now his pure power was 13 times that of a human. Don't underestimate this increase of less than 1/3. Not only strength, but also physique, speed, facial perception, etc. have been greatly improved to a higher level. Venom's bulletproof outer shell and various combat abilities make up for the lack of offensive and defensive abilities of the super soldier, and he has completely transformed into a combat creature that fights for the sake of fighting. Although your appearance has become hideous and ferocious, I have torn apart even the ancient giant monsters from alien space with my bare hands. Do you, a mere human, think you can rival the gods? Kratos spoke in a solemn and majestic voice, but his eyes became more profound and solemn. A faint divine light diffused over the surface of his body, and the pressure that surpassed all living beings leaked outward. Kyle smiled grimly, unmoved, his scarlet eyes flashing coldly, and he exuded a violent, evil, murderous, wild, and fearless fighting spirit. It doesn't matter if you are a human or a god. I will beat you up. I will kill you while I can. Tread! The floor collapsed and shattered. Kyle suddenly exploded, transformed into a blurry black afterimage, and launched an extremely violent attack towards Kratos. Right now, the opponent is still dizzy and injured from falling from a high altitude, while Kyle is at his peak after Venom's return. There's no reason for him to wait for the opponent to recover. Kratos raised his head quickly and saw a bright knife light flashing by. It turned out that Kyle's left arm had completely transformed into a huge blade. The handle was a shoulder, and the sharp blade cut through the air, slashing down swiftly from top to bottom. Crossing his arms in front of him, Kratos blocked the blade's blow, which only broke a trace of his skin. But then, Kyle's eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he quickly stretched out his free right hand, which transformed into a black and tough long whip, bounced out, and wrapped around Kratos' neck. Kratos' expression changed slightly, and he wanted to reach out to pull the whip, but how could Kyle give him the time to fight back? Dash in the air, explode. Kelson grinned grimly and activated the skill of aerial sprint. The energy tide under his feet erupted in chaos, and he and Kratos, who was entangled and bound by the whip, rushed up to a height of 30 meters again in an instant. This is to give you back what you gave me before. When the man reached the highest point in the air, Kyle pulled the whip with both hands and swung it back suddenly like a shoulder throw. Bang! Kratos was smashed to the ground, and the bald guy was hit again, making him dizzy. Come again! Kyle seemed to be quite resentful about what happened before. He glided down and dragged Kratos, who had no time to break free from the whip, to the edge of the venue. He climbed upside down and stood on the wall of the duel arena, pulling and swinging the whip, hanging Kratos' body up, swinging it again, and smashing it to the ground. Gravel was flying everywhere, dust was rolling, and the duel arena was shaking slightly. Oh my God! Is that still Mr. Kyle? And Lee and her brother, and by Bo, were in the front area of the audience, watching the scene from a close distance and looking at each other in surprise. Is it ever going to end? In the duel arena, Kratos suddenly roared, depression and anger written all over his face. He planted his feet firmly on the ground after falling down and simply pulled Kyle, who was standing on the wall, over by pulling his neck back. Kyle reacted quickly canceling the long whip form of his left hand, gliding in the low sky with the help of his wings, and quickly passed over Kratos' head. Kratos squatted and jumped up with an amazing bounce approaching Kyle, trying to knock him away with a punch. Claw form. Kyle stared, and 3 dark claws extended from his clenched left fist, colliding with the opponent's fist with divine power. Crack! The dark claws shattered and collapsed from the tip to the end of the fist. Sure enough, it's still too difficult to take a punch from the God Clan head-on. Having suffered a loss, Kyle sighed helplessly, covering his painful left arm and gliding away from the subsequent attack. In the duel arena, Kratos was the most depressed. When fully covered in venom, Kyle has many attack forms, and his movements are so flexible that he can even glide and stay in the air for a short period of time. The gods without divine weapons are like birds with broken wings. Not only their strength is greatly reduced, but they are also unable to fly solely by divine power. I don't know where my artifact battle axe is. If my artifact is still there. Kratos gritted his teeth and fell back to the ground powerlessly. A while ago, he still had some connection with the broken battle axe, until a few days ago, when this connection was suddenly and completely severed. Kratos had no idea that the axe was in Kyle's card space, and had become a private collector's edition item card. In the following battle, Kyle did not choose to fight Kratos head-on, but cleverly used his own agility and cleverness, and attacked with various forms, to consume and torture Kratos' power and spirit bit by bit like hunting prey. Kratos was not afraid at all. His body was thick and tough, and he had divine power and extremely high physical resistance. Even if he was cut down by Kyle's strongest blade, he only suffered superficial injuries. For a moment, neither could do anything to the other, and the fight between the two became a stalemate that lasted indefinitely. But despite this, the audience in the auditorium was still watching the scene in a thrilling manner, and their eyes never left the fierce battle arena for even a second. It's not a solution to keep dragging it on like this. Kyle had just jumped and glided to dodge Kratos' powerful punch, and a thought flashed through his mind. Is there any other combat form that I haven't used yet? Venom seemed to know what he was thinking and quickly gave him hints through his mind. Oh, and there's that new trick. Kyle took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and adjusted his condition. He used his wings to float in the air 10 meters high and clenched his hands tightly to gather strength. The next moment, all the strength in his body was drained away. At the same time, the keratinous membrane coat transformed by the venom glowed with a dark glow, as if it was preparing for something. What new tricks are you playing? Kratos snorted coldly, stomped on the floor, and flew up like a cannonball, quickly approaching Kyle in the air. Just as Kratos approached, Kyle suddenly opened his eyes, his scarlet pupils glowed brightly, and he stared forward calmly and indifferently. Sorry, the winner is already decided. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tens of millions of sharp black tentacles with a dark sheen suddenly and densely burst out at high speed from his body. It was like the death fireworks in hell, blooming to its fullest in an instant. Thousands of tentacles, ending everything. Chapter 193. Borrow 3 more hours from heaven and become a god. Tick! The sharp black tentacles pierced Kratos' chest and limbs. Although they did not completely penetrate the body of the god, they still penetrated more than half of the way into the bones. Bright red blood flowed down along the tentacles and quietly dripped onto the ground. The rest of the more than 1,000 black tentacles exploded in an all-round and 360-degree manner without any blind spots, shooting downwards. The ground was as fragile as a piece of paper and was easily pierced, forming vertical black pillars. The tentacles shot up into the sky, piercing through the floor of the rooftop room at the top of the Interstellar Stadium. Several of the Grandmaster's confidants were unlucky enough to have their bodies completely pierced through, with one of the tips just barely stopping at the Grandmaster's crotch. The tentacles that shot out in all directions just reached the audience seats and hovered in front of the alien audience. Even half a meter forward would be enough to kill hundreds of creatures. Kyle opened his mouth in shock. The power and shape of these thousands of tentacles made even him a little confused for a moment. But there was no time to think about it, as all the strength in my body was almost drained away, and fatigue and weakness invaded my whole body. What was even more serious was the venom. The gliding wings, the dark hood, the keratin membrane biological coat. All of these melted like ice and snow meeting the sun, turning into countless sticky black liquids that faded from Kyle's body and were about to flow down like blood. Now in the dual field, the only one who is still in good condition is Weiss. It quickly crawled behind Kyle, fixed itself in place, and transformed into a rocket backpack, emitting a slightly blue tail flame, causing Kyle to remain suspended in the air. "Venom!" Kyle shouted, and with a wave of his hand, he turned the falling ball of black liquid, which was the venom itself, into a card, which returned and sank into the card space. "Master, sonic detection has detected that there are guard spaceships surrounding this area." Weiss responded with a message. "Then we will reveal our last trump card." Kyle's eyes were dim, and he looked feebly at Kratos, who was unconscious and held in the air by the tentacles. He gritted his teeth and said, "No matter what, we must take this Protoss away from here safely." At this time, in the rooftop room of the Interstellar Stadium, the Grandmaster was still in shock, and he kicked the black tentacles that were close to him to pieces. His face was gloomy and silent. His confidants who knew him well knew that he was furious at this moment. Slaughter realized that the opportunity had come, stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "Master, that man is not like other challengers. It is too difficult to control him through means. If he is kept alive, he will be a disaster for Sakastar sooner or later. I suggest that we take advantage of this moment to make him fall forever in this duel arena. Okay, you will be the leader of this mission, and you can freely mobilize the guards of the entire planet." The Grandmaster nodded without hesitation and said with narrowed eyes, "But I have one request. Save the Demon King Kratos." "Yes." Tushawa showed ecstasy on his face. He glanced at the chaotic duel arena, turned around decisively, and walked out of the room. He went to the elevator, took out the communication device, and ordered all the guarding spaceships around the venue, seal off the venue, send a few combat spaceships in, and use laser cannons to kill the Challenger Tyrant, even if it means flattening the duel venue. As for protecting Kratos, Carnage did not tell the guards even a word. To it, any factors that hinder the killing of Kyle and Venom are burdens and encumbrances. Kyle must die. The camera switches back to the StarCraft arena. Due to the terrifying impact of thousands of tentacles, the audience seats were in complete chaos and noisy, and countless alien audiences fled outside in panic. The venue was like a huge amount of beehive, which was completely blown up by the final blow. In the field full of intertwined tentacles, Kyle, with the help of Vess, was tearing Kratos' body off the tentacles and carrying it on his shoulders with great difficulty. Just after completing this step, Kyle heard the humming sound of several spaceship engines from the open night sky above his head. Immediately afterwards, the dazzling bright laser cannon roared down and hit the black pillar with remaining tentacles. Bang, bang, bang. The pillar exploded, the air wave swept through, and countless debris like black glass fragments fell all over the sky. Seeing this scene, the alien audience became even more terrified and rushed out of the museum regardless of everything. The multiple exits were crowded into a mountain of people. VS, if we don't hurry up, we're really going to be stuck here forever, Kyle urged in a whisper, carrying Kratos' heavy body and using the rockets on his back to move under the tentacles, using them as cover to avoid the laser cannon shooting down. However, the tentacles were being bombarded by the spacecraft and were being flattened at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed that there was no place to hide. Here it comes, Weiss suddenly reminded. As if to verify its words, a fighter plane, speeding to the extreme and like a stream of light, rushed into the interstellar venue area. The laser muzzle jumped and aimed at the two guard ships that were attacking Kyle and fired 2 shots. Bang! The 2 spaceships were destroyed on the spot, with flames and black smoke billowing, and crashed into the dual field. The secondary explosion of the fuselage turned the wide field into a sea of fire. Call out! Propelled by the rocket on his back, Kyle carried Kratos and soared into the sky from the sea of fire. The fighter plane immediately opened the cabin door to welcome them. After the two entered the cabin, the engine at the tail end of the fuselage roared before the door was even closed, and they sped away to the outside of the interstellar field. FK. Tulu just walked out of the elevator and looked up to see this scene. His face suddenly changed drastically, and he shouted loudly into the communication device in his hand. They're trying to escape by plane. All guard the spaceship and chase them. No need to worry, just destroy them with both the people and the plane. Clear. After receiving the order, countless guard spaceships waiting near the venue started their engines and accelerated, chasing Kyle's fighter plane. Inside a high-speed flying Eagle fighter, Kyle threw the seriously injured and unconscious Kratos on the floor of the cabin. Then he fell to the metal floor beside him, gasping for breath. The genetic disease is taking advantage of his physical weakness and forcibly taking away the super soldier's physical ability. Weiss quickly transformed into a robot, jumped onto the main driver's seat, inserted his hands into the sockets of the fighter's pilot's instrument, and completely connected himself to the fighter's system, thereby perfectly controlling everything about the fighter. VS reported, "Master, there are nearly 30 spaceships chasing us from behind. Should we fight back or flee in which direction? Don't worry about them. There are too many enemy ships. If we get caught in a firefight, we won't be able to escape from here." Kyle panted rapidly, relying on his willpower to not fall into coma, and struggled to get up with his hands supporting himself. "Go around in circles with them and try to buy me as much time as possible." His mind moved slightly, and the ability card on Kratos appeared before his eyes, shining brightly. Without even glancing at the other ability cards, Kyle's eyes fell directly on the rare purple ability card, Protoss Gene. He wants to become a god. Chapter 194, Evolution into God. Today's Sokka Star has completely changed. The main entrance of the interstellar venue is like a big mouth, constantly spitting out dense alien audiences. When they look up, they will definitely see the extremely spectacular sight of the night sky of the main city. A fighter plane streaked across the sky like a meteor and fled to the wilderness outside the main city. Behind it, dozens of guard spaceships chased it relentlessly, illuminating the night sky with their lights and engine flames, making it as bright as day. "Don't lose me!" On one of the large guard ships in the middle and rear, Slaughter was sitting in the co-pilot position, watching the fighter planes fleeing at high speed at the end of his field of vision, and issued an order through the communication device. "If you get close to the attackable range, open fire immediately." Okay. The guard spaceship at the front immediately aimed at the tail of the Eagle fighter and continued to fire. More than a dozen laser beams formed a net-like coverage forward. "Call out!" The Eagle fighter seemed to have eyes behind its tail wing. Facing the dense laser fire, it maintained its speed calmly. At the critical moment, it suddenly turned sideways and slid down, With a beautiful flick of its tail, it avoided all the laser beams and even increased the distance by another 10 meters. Originally thought to be just a coincidence, the guarding spacecraft resumed firing continuously. In a short moment, the night sky became brighter at dawn, forming a terrifying rain of laser light, covering the area in front of the Eagle fighter. Swoosh, swoosh, the tail flame of the Eagle fighter jet spurted, and it went through flipping, climbing, lowering, side sliding, and other movements. It was so flexible that it didn't seem like it was made of metal machinery. Originally, it was a living steel falcon. The laser cannon beams all missed the target again, becoming a light curtain that highlighted the fighter's flying posture. This was simply a large-scale live broadcast of a show of driving skills, which stunned the guards who were chasing in the spacecraft. Is the one driving the fighter plane a monster? The guard pilots had no idea that the fighter plane was under full control of Weiss at this time. Vesper is connected to the computer system to achieve perfect control of the unity of man and machine. Even if the most outstanding spaceship pilot in the universe comes, he is still no match for this artificial intelligence mechanical creature. Are you addicted to bombardment? Look at my counterattack. In the main cockpit of the fighter plane, Weiss whispered. A pair of mechanical arms transformed into electrical plugs transmitted electric light, and his thoughts calculated with a supercomputer system, controlling the fighter plane to respond quickly. The master only told it to avoid fighting and maintain high-speed flight to delay time, but he did not tell it not to fight back when faced with an attack. Under the fuselage of the Eagle fighter, the two gun muzzles protruded and rotated backwards, aiming at the group of spacecraft behind it and opening fire directly. The next moment, two small guard spaceships in the front were damaged, turned into two fireballs, and crashed down, hitting the garbage mountain in the wild, and exploded. What kind of monster is this pilot? Facing the pressure of so many spaceships chasing and bombarding him, he still has the energy to fight back. The pilot of the guard spaceship was startled and no longer dared to mindlessly chase and shoot from behind. As a result, the speed will inevitably decrease, and the fighter jets can only keep a certain distance from them. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Tall Lou cursed in English, thought for a moment, and then ordered, "Tell the remaining guard ships in the main city not to follow us in this direction, but to circle in other directions to form an encirclement and slowly shrink it." Time passes by every second. At this time, in the cabin of the Hawk fighter, Ka was half clinging on Kratos' body, in a state of semi-comatose and semi-consciousness. His hands tightly grasped Kratos' clothes, and no matter how the fighter plane rolled or drifted in the air, he did not get away from the opponent at all. The ability card of Protoss Gene is being read, and the countdown is still going on. Purple ability card. It takes 3 hours to draw. This period of time is neither long nor short. Facing an enemy attack, it is undoubtedly a race against death. Relying on his perfect control of the Hawk fighter, Vess actually took the guard spacecraft to circle in the wilds of Sokka. With continued high speed and precise driving, Weiss's condition did not deteriorate. Instead, the guards who had been driving vigilantly for a long time secretly groaned. If I chase, I can't catch up. If I don't chase, it's impossible. In this stalemate of pursuit, time is delayed indefinitely, until more than 2 hours later. Vess still maintained a certain distance from the guard fleet in the rear, but soon it suddenly detected signs of the presence of a fleet of spaceships in front. Weiss was just about to adjust his flight direction and escape to the left or right, but after a sonic scan, he discovered that there were also large-scale guard spaceships appearing in the areas on both sides. "Master, we are completely surrounded." They sent spaceships in the opposite direction to circle the planet and formed an encirclement. Weiss sent an emergency report, but Kyle behind him did not respond. He looked back in surprise. Inside the cabin, Kyle had let go of Kratos' clothes and was lying unconscious on the floor alone. His brows were furrowed, his forehead was covered with sweat, and his handsome face was full of pain. The surface of his perfect human physique was covered with a faint divine luster, and his body seemed to be burning with golden flames of nothingness. Kyle is completing his final transformation into a god. If one could peek inside, one would definitely see that the genetic structure in his body, which was originally on the verge of collapse due to radiation and the reorganization of the super soldier genes, now has a genetic code that is hundreds of times more complex. It forcefully and domineeringly invades with a domineering demeanor, defeats and erases the defective genetic faults in the body, and reconstructs a perfect genetic strip as a whole. The extraordinary changes in the human genetic nature have caused the bones, muscles, blood, and hair of the physique to undergo deification simultaneously. As if knowing that this was a critical moment, Weiss stopped shouting to disturb Kyle. He perceived the guarding spaceships and fighter planes surrounding him from all sides. Without thinking too much, he made the most appropriate choice. The Eagle fighter suddenly raised its head and rushed into the sky like a rocket, speeding up and climbing in altitude as if escaping from the planet. "Ha! They can't escape!" Slaughter laughed wildly. He lifted the driver next to him with one hand and threw him backwards like cargo, then sat in the driver's seat himself. It drove a large spaceship and was the first to catch up, chasing the fighter plane and moving at full speed out into the universe. On the dome of the dark night sky, an imperceptible small space wormhole quietly opened, and in the blink of an eye, it expanded into a huge dark red hole in the sky. The Hawk fighters and large spacecraft rushed straight up, unfortunately facing the center of the huge hole in the sky. The storm swept around the hole, forcing the surrounding guarding ships to retreat in a hurry. At this moment, inside the cabin of the fighter plane, Kyle's body floated off the ground, and his silver hair grew long enough to fall to his shoulders. He exuded a crystal aura and an aura that was in harmony with the universe. He calmly opened his eyes, and in his golden pupils, there was a flame burning and raging. Chapter 195. God of Fire, Kyle, I became a god? Falling from a suspended state to the cabin floor, Kyle calmly raised his hands and gently clenched his 5 fingers under the gaze of the golden eyes. The body's strength does not need to be stored through the muscles, but is naturally concentrated in the palms. He now had an illusion that if he punched with all his strength, he would blast a giant hole in the metal plate of the fighter's cabin. The strength has increased about 10 times compared to before. Kyle was secretly surprised. After the perfect human gene super soldier is integrated with the Protoss gene god, the power of this kind of demigod or super god is increased tenfold, which is about 100 times that of humans. What does this mean? It means that with Superman's grip strength of more than 10 tons, he can easily lift even a public bus and throw it 10 meters away like a sandbag. And strength is only one aspect. The overall increase also includes physical strength, speed, spirit, vitality, 5 senses perception, physical and energy resistance, etc. Everything is at the level of a mythical Superman. Wait, there is another wonderful feeling. Kyle calmed down and could perceive that there was some kind of mysterious power surging in his body, just like blood flowing continuously throughout his body. This should be the power that the gods are born with, the divine power. Kyle looked thoughtful, his eyes fell on his palms, and he snapped his fingers slightly. A golden red flame emerged and flickered between his fingers. Divine flame. This is the change in nature that is manifested by his divine power flowing outward and manifesting in the real outside world. With the divine genes in his body, he has the instinct to possess and control it freely. Kyle suddenly realized that the divine power was a bit like the human magic power developed by the supreme wizard Ancient One. However, magic power needs to be suspended to open the door within humans. It is a borrowed power that can only strengthen the spirit and soul. It will indirectly affect the body after reaching a certain level. Divine power is the innate power that gods are born with. It directly strengthens the spirit and physique of gods. With divine power, they can survive in any harsh environment. With divine power, they can control divine tools and hold the cosmic stone in their hands. It was as if he had opened a permanent door in his body, leaping out of the realm of ordinary creatures in the universe and completely stepping into the realm of gods. Even if Thanos holds the Infinity Gauntlet and collects all 6 cosmic stones, he will not turn into ashes and die under the laws of the universe with a snap of his fingers. Am I really a god now? The god of fire? Kyle touched his smooth chin. Even he was so surprised for a moment that he felt like he was living in a dream. The genetic diseases that plague the body's lifespan are completely eradicated, and the body breaks free from its shackles and evolves into a whole new realm. In human form, he became a god. The helpless act of resolutely leaving the earth and choosing to set foot in the universe finally brought unimaginable huge rewards. It was a close call. I almost died in the duel arena. Kyle lowered his head and looked at Kratos, who was still unconscious at his feet, with lingering fear. Only after achieving a divine body did he realize how powerful creatures like the gods are. Even if Kyle stood still now, without the protection of the venom coat, he would not be in danger of life if a special soldier attacked him with swords, guns, axes, biological and chemical poisons, firearms, and artillery shells. To the gods, humans are as weak as ants. To seriously injure them is harder than ascending to heaven. Master, are you awake? The shout from Vess in the main driver's seat interrupted Kyle's thoughts and brought his consciousness back to reality. Weiss, you did a great job. You really managed to make it through 3 hours. Kyle praised. The fighter plane was obviously flying vertically upwards at high speed. He used the climbing ability to stand upside down on the deck. Master, our current situation is not optimistic. We are now in the eye of a large space wormhole and cannot escape. There is also a large spaceship chasing us, constantly bombarding us with laser cannons in an attempt to destroy our fighter planes. While Weiss was reporting, the tail of the fighter plane was accidentally hit by the laser from below. The fuselage suddenly lost balance and shook violently, and countless instruments flashed red warning lights. Let's deal with the flies in the back first. VS, open the rear cabin for me. Kyle kicked Kratos to a seat, fastened his seatbelt quickly, turned around calmly, and walked towards the rear cabin. Kyle walked to the rear cabin, where the entire deck was sliding sideways, revealing the chaotic storm scene in the sky outside. About 20 meters below, there was a large spaceship chasing like a mad dog. It's you. Kyle looked forward with an energetic gaze, and when he saw the person in the main driving seat of the large spaceship, his eyes narrowed slightly. At the same time, Massacre, who was driving a large spaceship in pursuit, also saw Kyle standing on the edge of the rear deck of the fighter plane. Kyle. The former steward's eyes turned scarlet, and dark red, thread-like liquid surged from his body, turning into huge amounts of muscle biological shell on his body surface. Soon, it was completely transformed into a huge amount of humanoid monster due to anger, half a time taller and stronger than the fully venom-covered mode. You must die here, Massacre roared hoarsely, quickly operating the driving instruments, adjusting the front laser cannon of the large spaceship, and aiming at the rear cabin of the fighter where Kyle was. Kyle's face was calm. He just stood there motionless, watching the massacre in the driver's seat indifferently. Slaughter was filled with fear, his face twisted wildly, and he pressed the firing button with his big hand. Milky white energy gathered at the muzzle, and then a blue-white laser beam shot out, rushing straight towards Kyle. At a distance of 20 meters, the laser beam arrived in an instant. It seemed impossible to avoid it, but in Kyle's golden eyes, the laser beam was slowing down and looked like a high-speed moving baseball. Although it was still very fast, its trajectory was not impossible to predict. At the critical moment, Kyle raised his left hand, a golden flame ignited on his palm, and slapped the laser beam that was falling in front of him. Bang! The laser beam made an abrupt turn, deviating 45 degrees to the left, brushing past the fighter's tail and disappearing. Massacre watched this scene with his mouth wide open, his heart once again filled with fear. Blocking a laser with bare hands? Damn, he's gotten stronger again. It was just about to control the spacecraft's laser cannon to fire again. But when it looked up, it was horrified to see that Kyle's left arm was burning with flames, and his palm was raised, facing forward. Carnage, you are the evil product of the negative consciousness accumulated by Venom and I during World War II. You are my former comrade in arms, and also my inner demon. Kyle calmly watched the massacre and said softly in a farewell voice, "But World War II on Earth has long ended. Everything is either frozen or has disappeared from this world forever. So goodbye, Massacre." I hope you won't have anything to do with me in the next life." Kyle finished speaking and gently pressed forward his left palm, which was already filled with blindingly hot flames, while his 5 fingers twisted and rotated slightly. A column of flame burst out, burning and distorting the air wherever it passed, and it rushed straight into the cockpit of the large spaceship like a flaming dragon. "No, don't!" Tuan Mao opened his eyes wide in horror, looking at the raging flames coming towards him. It let out a tragic and sharp scream, and the tall and strong monster's body began to melt into liquid like a snowman under the sunlight. Bang! The flames melted the windshield tempered glass and poured into the cockpit of the large spacecraft, wreaking havoc. The slaughter inside only struggled a little before its figure quickly disappeared inch by inch. The large spaceship turned into a fireball, falling straight down with flames and black smoke. Massacre and Death. Chapter 196. Leaving Sakar, Kyle cleaned up the mess himself. His face was calm, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Carnage is a split body of venom that learned his evil thoughts. It is not a creature from a card like Venom, and Carnage is not controlled by the rules of creature cards. If they had unilaterally chosen to hide and flee as soon as the massacre began, instead of becoming his enemy, how could we have ended up like this today? Kyle turned around and returned to the cockpit of the fighter. Vess's mechanical hands were still inserted into the driving instruments. Looking out the windshield of the fighter, he could see that the sky seemed to have a hole in it. Red lightning flashed in the giant hole, and the hole swirled and condensed into a violent storm that raged around. The fighter plane was right in the center of the hole in the sky, in the midst of a raging storm. Weiss knew that Kyle had solved the problem at the rear and reported, "Master, it is obvious that the fighter plane can no longer break through the wormhole. Then speed up and enter the space-time wormhole. Anyway, our goal has been achieved, and there is no point in staying on Sakar," Kyle said calmly, without any attachment to Sakar at all. Although some items, such as the suspension ring, vibranium arm guards, energy dual guns, etc., have not yet been found. Not all of the high-tech items commissioned by Enli to purchase have arrived, but all that is no longer important. Nothing can compare to the benefits of Protoss Gene. I'll come back here to settle accounts with the Grandmaster when I have the chance. It's time to plan my return to Earth. Kyle was full of anticipation. It had indeed been not long since he arrived on Sakar, and it seemed as if his farewell to the Carl family was just yesterday. But going in and out of the space-time wormhole would consume a lot of time. If you could successfully return to Earth, you really wouldn't know how many years had passed. But no matter how many years have passed, it doesn't matter. After all, the Carl family has infinite equations, and he is already a member of the God family. With the life card in hand, 10 or 100 years of time are really insignificant. Sitting in the co-pilot's seat, Kyle was fastening his seatbelt. Vess reminded him, "Please hold on tight," and then he controlled the fighter plane to aim at the center of the wormhole in the sky. The tail engine roared, and he rushed forward at the maximum speed. Clatter! Inside the wormhole, bits and pieces of alien garbage kept falling and hitting the front end of the fighter, causing the fuselage to vibrate slightly. Since I don't know the exact location of the Earth, I can only fly and jump in my fighter plane to ensure safe passage through the unstable wormhole at the fastest speed. Up to now, my energy fuel is almost exhausted. I hope that the random exit will lead to a civilized planet. When Weiss said this, Kyle's heart skipped a beat, and he had a bad feeling. The fighter plane quickly turned into a stream of light and slammed into the dark red thunderstorm wormhole. The subtle sense of time and space distortion filled every corner of the cabin. "It's begun," Weiss whispered, and the fighter plane suddenly vibrated violently. Kyle looked out the windshield and saw countless star fields and planets blurring and receding, and the universe was in upside-down chaos. "Jump! Jump! Jump!" The fighter plane continued to fly and jump until the exponential deviation of the energy and fuel instrument dropped close to zero, as if it had finally escaped from the space-time wormhole. The front of the fighter plane suddenly became clear, revealing a vast reddish-brown wilderness. Crack, crack, crack. The fighter plane had already braked and slowed down, but it was still out of control and crashed into the wilderness at high speed, turning into a bulldozer, leaving a 50-meter-long plow mark on the ground. It finally tilted and hit a small stone mountain, before shutting down. Weiss, where is this? Kyle stood up from the passenger seat and glanced out the windshield. What came into view was a desolate planet. Here is Weiss pulled out the mechanical arm, glanced at the information on the projection screen, and replied, "The cosmic area that is not in the database should be the planet of human civilization and mysterious, unknown area." What kind of explanation is that? Kyle pulled the corner of his mouth helplessly, turned around, and saw a pair of eyes staring at him from behind. The two were silent, and their eyes met briefly. "Are you awake?" Kyle smiled indifferently, looking at Kratos, who was half lying on the seat. After all, he was the god of fire now, so there was no reason for him to be afraid of the seriously injured and weak god of war. Ves quickly jumped onto Kyle's shoulder and hid behind the back of his head. Even though it was a mechanical life, the thrilling confrontation in the duel arena still made its system program fear Kratos. "I didn't expect that I would be defeated by a human in the end." Kratos grinned with difficulty, looked at Kyle calmly, and asked, "Why don't you give me a quick death?" "Because you were useful to me before, but now, whether you are useful or not depends on your choice." Kyle stepped forward, looking down at Kratos with his golden eyes, and said in a cold and majestic tone, "Submit or die. You only have these two choices." As he spoke, a faint golden divine flame rose from his body. Divine power was the most conspicuous racial symbol of the gods. "You are also a god?" Kratos was shocked, his eyes widened, and he looked at Kyle in disbelief, whose aura was completely different from before. He quickly shook his head and said, "No, it's impossible. You were definitely not a god before. Forget it. Whether you are a god or not is not important." Under Kyle's vague threat, Kratos grinned, his eyes condensed with determination, and said with determination and domineering face, "I am the god of war. Even though I have been defeated, my artifacts have been destroyed, and I have old illnesses, I am still the brave and invincible god of war. How can I surrender to others?" "Okay, I already know the answer." Kyle nodded and didn't intend to waste time persuading. He was just trying it out and didn't expect too much from it. Of course, it is great to have a god of war as a subordinate. But if the god of war chooses to surrender, is he still the god of war? "I'll give you a quick death," Kyle said calmly, raising his left hand and combining his index and middle fingers together, igniting a fierce golden flame. The temperature in the fighter cabin instantly rose by dozens of degrees. "Let's get started. Also, I know the planet you've come to, so I don't mind telling you that this is the ancient battlefield where that old guy Odin's divine domain fought against a powerful race." After Kratos finished speaking, he simply closed his eyes and calmly waited for death. In fact, his body was no longer as strong as it was in the duel arena. Just like Kyle before him, he fell into a terminal illness caused by an old war disease. The difference is that Kratos can only die as a god of war, while Kale can make a further step forward after being reborn. "I want to know, who defeated you when you were at the peak of your power as the god of war, destroyed the artifact, and exiled you to Sakaar?" Kyle asked. "You only need to know one thing. When they appear in front of you, you will know everything clearly." Kratos said vaguely without opening his eyes, and then fell silent without wanting to say more. "Goodbye, god of war," Kyle whispered, poking two fingers at Kratos' brow, and the flame condensed at his fingertips broke through the high temperature of 5,000 degrees Celsius on the surface of the sun, and with the strength 100 times that of humans, pierced through the forehead and skull of the god's body. The flames raged and devoured the inside, preserving Kratos' body but destroying everything inside the head. Divine God. Chapter 197. Ancient Battlefield. Kratos' vital signs disappeared, and he lay on the seat of the fighter plane with his eyes closed forever. There was only a 2-finger-sized burn hole between his eyebrows, and no blood flowed out. Everything had been evaporated into nothingness by the perfectly controlled flame. A generation of war god died at the end. After completing the act of killing the gods, Kyle calmly withdrew his 2 fingers and waved them lightly. The golden flames dissipated from his fingertips, and a few wisps of green smoke slowly dissipated in the cabin. After achieving the divine body, he also realized that Kratos was indeed terminally ill. Like a god with an old illness, otherwise with a physique 100 times that of humans, plus divine power that tends to protect the body and bless strength. How could he be seriously injured among thousands of tentacles? Of course, the power of thousands of tentacles is also undoubtedly strong. That drained all of Kyle's energy and caused Venom to fall into a deep coma, with huge side effects. It could only be used as a last-ditch killer move and could not be used in normal mode. Master, can you let me deal with Kratos' body? Vest jumped onto Kratos' knees and asked, "What do you want to use it for?" Kyle asked in surprise. The corpse of a Protoss-like creature is the perfect experimental subject. We can try to understand the secret of the source of power in the Protoss blood, or transform him into an artificial god of the semi-mechanical type. Vest's mechanical eye kept turning, emitting red laser light, scanning Kratos' body from top to bottom. It is a mechanical creature based on the semi-intelligent Jarvis. The system program seems to be permeated with Howard's madness for scientific research, and it has a great interest in everything worth studying. There's no problem with the research, but let's put the matter of transforming it into an artificial divine weapon on hold for now. Kyle nodded. He still had a certain respect for Kratos, which was a treatment that no other dead enemy had ever received before. Kratos is the most difficult opponent Kyle has ever encountered. The opponent knows the secret of his transformation into a god after the First World War, and the two have clear positions in the duel to the death. Rather than keeping a war god who is unloyal and difficult to control, it is better to kill him and be done with it once and for all. After Vest preserved Kratos' body in the fighter's freezer, he and Kyle left the cabin and came to the desolate land outside. The Eagle fighter's energy and fuel were completely consumed, and many parts of the fuselage were damaged due to the emergency landing. It was obvious that it had completely lost the ability to continue interstellar navigation. Kyle drew a card directly, turned the Hawk fighter into a card, put it back into the card space, stood on the hill, and looked around. What caught his eyes was a dead and silent wilderness with no signs of life. There was no green of trees or grass. It was just brown gravel and dust. It was even quieter and more lifeless than the deserts on Earth. The gravity is 1.2 times that of the Earth. The oxygen content in the atmosphere is scarce, and the energy of various elements is chaotic. This is not a planet that is easy for life to live on. Weiss responded softly. Kyle nodded, agreeing with this statement, but he did not wear any protective equipment such as a space suit. He only changed into Earth casual clothes such as a wallet and jeans, and he did not look uncomfortable at all. The gods can survive in any harsh environment. Even in the vacuum of the universe, they can still rely on divine power to survive safely. It can be said that the gods are not the strongest creatures in the universe, but they are definitely one of the most perfectly evolved races in the world. Two antennas stood up on Weiss's head, and a string of garbled characters flashed in his mechanical eyes. He suddenly told Kyle a piece of information that surprised him. Master, on the left side, about 10 kilometers away from here, the radio waves have detected the presence of two creatures. A creature on a non-living planet? Kyle touched his chin, picked up Weiss from the ground, jumped down the hill, landed on the flat ground, and waved his hand forward. An item card was quickly pulled out and fell to the ground in front and turned into a solid object. It was a retro twin-engine motorcycle with a rough and domineering appearance. The metal body had a beautiful curve and a sense of craftsmanship. It was also made and modified by Howard. This was built when he and Captain America were fighting Hydra, but Steve's car self-destructed during the attack on the Hydra base. But Kyle kept it in the card space until now. Kyle sat astride the motorcycle, inserted the key, and started it. VS transformed into mechanical sunglasses and rested on his nose. The navigation route was displayed in 3 dimensions on the inside of the lenses, leading directly to the destination of the creature 10 kilometers away. Kyle twisted his wrist quickly and added a few pinches of gas. The rear tire of the motorcycle immediately turned, and the engine started like thunder, splashing a cloud of sand and stones backwards. The motorcycle was like a wild horse that had broken free from its reins, accelerating towards the wilderness ahead. After a drift, it adjusted its direction and sped away. A desolate planet without any signs of life. Its surface is dry, dark brown land, and the hills stand alone like graves. Boom, boom, boom. The high-speed motorcycle suddenly and violently broke the silence, raising a cloud of dust and sweeping across the endless wilderness. Crack! The wheels crushed something light and brittle underneath. Kyle frowned slightly as he drove forward. The dust covered the skeletons of various unknown creatures. There might be a monster skeleton as huge as a hill, a 5-meter-tall human skull, or the bones of a deformed creature that is less than half the size of a human. Most of these bones are buried under the sand and rocks of the earth, with only the tip of the iceberg exposed. It is unknown how much more is buried underneath, as if due to the long-term irrigation of the blood of living things. Even the originally brown land has turned into an eternal dark red. Kratos is right. This is the ancient battlefield where the higher races fought for the right to dominate the universe. Kyle sighed softly. Only large-scale wars between races in the universe can turn an entire planet into a battlefield, with corpses lying everywhere and blood flowing everywhere. Now, who is the superior race that rules this universe? The answer is obvious. The Asgard, the lineage of the Nordic gods. Asgard. Kyle was mumbling to himself when the cursor on the inside of Vess's sunglasses floated in front of his eyes, reminding him that he was approaching the location where the organism was detected by the sound waves earlier. We have arrived at the location, but just 10 seconds ago, the life symbols of the two organisms disappeared at the same time. Weiss reminded. Kyle nodded to show that he understood and continued to drive the motorcycle forward. He soon stopped in front of two dead creatures that were facing each other in close combat, and pushed his sunglasses up to his forehead in surprise. One of the corpses was a young soldier who looked like a human being. He was covered in silver armor and held a long sword. His blood-stained face showed determination and resoluteness. The other corpse was a 3-headed monster that was 2 or 3 times stronger and larger. It stood on 2 feet, with extremely ugly twisted facial features and a trident in its thick hands. The weapons of the two men pierced each other completely. Although both of them had lost their lives, their blood was still flowing down. It was obvious that they had been fighting to the death for a long time and had just finally died together. Chapter 198 Thor? I'm a step too late. Looking at the two alien corpses nearby, Kyle shrugged helplessly and soon seemed to realize something, and his gaze unexpectedly fell back on the body of the silver-armored soldier. His mind moved slightly, and several item cards quickly appeared, with detailed information on the cards presented before him. Ulu Longsword. A longsword mixed with a small amount of Ulu metal. Blue item card. Ulu is a kind of metal unique to the divine realm. It is hard, ductile, and highly compatible with divine power. This one-handed longsword is made mainly of silver, mixed with a very small amount of Ulu and refined, and the blade is extremely sharp. It can be attached with divine power to greatly increase the ability to kill enemies. Current status: extractable. Ulu armor. Armor mixed with a small amount of Ulu metal. Blue item card. The entire set of armor is mainly made of silver and a small amount of refined Ulu metal, which is comfortable and sturdy. After being activated with divine power, it can gain certain physical and elemental resistance. Current status: extractable. Made of metal from the divine realm, Ulu. Kyle muttered to himself and stretched out his left hand. After 3 seconds of reading time, the silver sword that was inserted into the ugly monster's lower abdomen disappeared instantly. At the same time, an item card quietly appeared in his hand, with a long sword image and data information printed on the front. Weiss was already used to this and still kept his sunglasses on, hanging on Kyle's forehead, sending out radio waves into the surrounding wilderness, searching for anything suspicious. Kyle did not stop and summoned the card in his hand into a physical entity. The long sword appeared out of thin air again and was held in his left hand. During the entire process, he did not move away from the motorcycle at all, and it looked like he was performing a telekinetic spell. Kyle simply activated his divine power, and the raging flames immediately spread from his arms to the hilt and blade of the sword. But under the divine flame of nearly 1,000 degrees Celsius, the silver sword not only showed no signs of melting, but all the dirt and blood on it evaporated completely, and the sword body became more silvery and translucent. Moreover, the flame that embodied the divine power naturally attached itself to the Wulu's sword. The two matched perfectly together, as if producing some kind of chemical reaction, turning the seemingly ordinary silver sword into an extremely dazzling flaming laser sword. Master, is this the divine weapon? Even Weiss was amazed by this magical scene, and was unable to draw a relevant scientific basis and conclusions through his own system data analysis. No, this is just a weapon mixed with a little bit of Wulu metal. It is far from being a divine weapon. Kyle shook his head slightly. His divine power dissipated, and he looked at the sword in his hand, feeling deeply moved. Just by mixing in a little bit of Wulu that is compatible with divine power, it is enough to make the silver sword transcend ordinary items and enter the ranks of blue-grade items. Compared with Earth's vibranium and sodium carbon steel, this Wulu metal is definitely more precious. However, the weapons made by Wulu can only be effective if they are creatures that possess divine power. Of course, this is not what Kyle cares about most at the moment. Weiss, we need to expand the scope of the search and make sure to find any living alien creatures. Kyle said in a deep voice, a light flashing in his eyes. The weapons and equipment made by Wulu are naturally the standard equipment for soldiers in the Divine Realm. The fact that soldiers from the Divine Realm appeared on this ancient battlefield proves that this planet still has a close connection with the Divine Realm. Understood. I will keep the radio waves propagating and search for any life forms within 10 kilometers, as well as scientific instruments with their own signals. Weiss said. Kyle nodded, started the motorcycle, and continued to drive forward at high speed after raising a cloud of dust. They seemed to be driving aimlessly in the wilderness, but in fact, Kyle and Weiss were working together to investigate and search for all suspicious signs of creatures. Half an hour later, Kyle was driving his motorcycle, quickly passing through another wilderness of bones. Just as he was feeling depressed for having gained nothing, a green cursor suddenly appeared on the inside of his sunglasses. Weiss's report sounded, Master, an abnormality has been detected somewhere. What's the anomaly? I hope it's useful intelligence information. Kyle asked quickly. Weiss replied, I'm not sure about the details. The radio waves I sent out approached that place and seem to be subject to some strong electromagnetic interference. The power source is close to the ground and is unstable, so it should not be caused by natural lightning. Navigate me there. Kyle gave the order decisively, without hesitation. After receiving the route instructions given by Weiss on the lens, he stomped his left foot on the ground, lifted the high-speed motorcycle high, did a beautiful tailspin in the air, quickly adjusted the front of the car, and rushed to the left without slowing down after landing. As the saying goes, a skilled person is daring. Now he is at least a divine creature. There is no need for him to be as timid as before when facing any situation in outer space. It only takes a moment. Kyle drove his motorcycle and approached the area that Weiss had led him to. Before he reached the center of the power source, he was able to sense the fierceness in the air. Boom! The small thunderclouds in the sky were gloomy and uncertain, and thunder roared from time to time. In the dense and huge sound of thunder, there was a faint roar of wild beasts. Kyle slowed down the motorcycle and rushed up a small hill. When he reached the top, he braked to stop, put the motorcycle back into the card space, and lowered his body to hide. He peered down and saw a blond young man and a creature as huge as a hill facing each other on the plain 50 meters away from the hillside. The sizes of their bodies were totally disproportionate. The blond young man had a rough and heroic face, and his appearance was not much different from that of a human. He wore a metal helmet that looked like two horns on his head, and his tall and strong body was clad in silver armor, with a red cloak fluttering in the wind. The lightning in the sky all struck the young man, and the glittering blue lightning intertwined outside the armor, becoming a foil for his majestic figure, just like an immortal and invincible Thor. No, it's like that's Thor. Bang! The blond young man swung a small hammer in his hand, spinning it at a windmill-like speed. As he swung it forward, his body flew off the ground into the sky. He rushed to the huge creature, wrapped in lightning, and hammered down with a force of 10,000 kilograms, hitting the head of the truck file size. The huge monster wailed, and was knocked to the ground. Thor! Kyle blinked and looked at the familiar figure. This time he was completely shocked. These days, are the Protoss everywhere? Just when we kill one, another one appears. And it's Thor, whose hammer plays as much a role as his comrade Captain America. In the final battle against Thanos, he, who awakens as the God King, is the only protagonist who can fight against Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet in his hand. Weiss, I want to find a way to return to Earth. Kyle pondered for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, how did he get out of the Earth? The teleportation ability of the space gem. In an instant, he crossed thousands of planets from Earth to Sakaar, the other end of the universe. Although the Space Stone was lost while traveling through the universe, in the Marvel world, space teleportation is not an exclusive function of the Space Stone. For example, the Rainbow Bridge dedicated to the Palace of the Gods. How can I borrow the Rainbow Bridge of the Thor family? Kyle squinted his eyes, hid on the side of the hillside, looked at Thor, who was holding a hammer and surrounded by lightning not far away, and began to think about his own calculations and plans in his mind. In the fierce battle in the wilderness, Thor was suspended in the air with the help of his hammer, looking majestic and domineering. He was about to attack the alien monster that had risen again, but suddenly he shuddered all over and had an ominous premonition in his heart.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.